Could we come to order? I'll call the meeting to order. I don't know with the setup of this room whether we're going to have a soccer game or we're going to have finance hearings by the look of the setup. In any event, pursuant to Standing Order 83-1, we are doing pre-budget consultations in advance of the 2017 budget. I welcome the witnesses here. As you know, in the letter that went to each of you, we outlined that we would like people to hold their presentations to about 5 minutes and especially emphasize anything you have to say on how do we better achieve economic growth in this country. And so with that, we will go to the first witness, the Canadian Association of Defence and Security Industries, Ms. Sian Ferrani.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, honourable members. Merci de m'avoir.
Thank you for having invited me to meet with you today.
My name is Kristen Sian Ferrani. I'm the president of the Canadian Association of Defence and Securities Industries, or CADSE. CADSE represents some 800 Canadian-based defence and security companies in Canada, and our industry accounts for some 63,000 jobs, contributes $6.7 billion to GDP, generates 60% of its revenue from exports, employs 30% of its workforce in engineering, research and technology fields, provides employee compensation that is 60% above the manufacturing sector's average, and is diverse, with significant representation in every region of Canada.
These figures are important in the context of the government's innovation program and the Defence Policy Review, two measures which will be completed by Budget 2017.
He's been urging the government to consider the Defence Review, the Innovation Agenda, and the recapitalization of the Canadian Armed Forces as an important opportunity to drive innovation-led growth in Canada. And this is my essential message to you today. What this requires is the development of a defence industrial policy that's tailored to Canada's unique security challenges and industrial-based capabilities. To our knowledge, we are the only G7 nation that does not practice one. Mais que voulons-nous dire par politique sur l'industrie?
What do we mean by a defence industrial policy?
Not necessarily require additional funding nor even new programming. It does require that the government set goals and priorities for defence sector growth in key areas of industrial capability. These capabilities could be ones at which Canada already excels, like quantum computing, for example, or that confer major economic and scientific returns to the country, or they could be ones that are important to Canada's sovereign interests. They would, of course, need to be derivative of the planned acquisitions of the Canadian Armed Forces, which some estimates put at over $200 billion over the next 15 to 20 years. This is the starting point for defence industrial policy. Once these overarching goals have been established, we need to better coordinate and connect the existing policies, programs and instruments that are scattered across the government, notably national security exemptions, industrial and technological benefits, the Build in Canada Innovation Program, the Strategic Aerospace and Defence Initiative, as well as export supports like the Canadian Commercial Corporation. The aim is to align and apply the various elements in a more coherent fashion along the chain from R&D to ultimately procurement to better achieve outcomes with respect to innovation, manufacturing, supply chain growth, and the scaling up of firms. It's also important to note that defence procurement is largely exempt from the trade agreements. One implication here is that Canadian prime contractors could and would be considered more strategically in procurements for major capital projects. Primes, or OEMs, do the bulk of the manufacturing in the defence industry and own intellectual property. which is essential to getting innovative and sustainable manufacturing, services, and high-wage employment in technology fields. When Canada has not done this, strategically important assets have been hollowed out through sales, transfers, or mergers. Incentivizing intellectual property transfer from foreign primes into Canada is also important. We need to go beyond just raw investment dollars. This allows Canadian companies to engage in activities that come with owning and exploiting intellectual property over a long period of time, well beyond any initial acquisition phase. When supply chain growth is the primary objective, the government needs to ensure that when foreign primes win contracts in Canada, Canadian firms are driven into the global supply chains of those primes. Ce ne sont en fait que quelques-uns des éléments essentiels.
These are just some of the key elements required in a defence industrial policy in Canada.
Honourable members, I'd like to reiterate that there is an important and rare opportunity now to drive innovation-led growth in the Canadian economy through the planned defence acquisitions, the value of which is large by any historical standards. I urge this committee to highlight this growth opportunity in your report and recommend that the government commit to working with industry to developing a made-in-Canada defence industrial policy. The potential to leverage defence procurement to create innovation and growth in every region of Canada is very real and achievable.
Thank you for having allowed me to address you today.
Thank you very much. Turning to the Canadian Gas Association, Mr. Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. CGA, the Canadian Gas Association, is the voice of Canada's natural gas delivery industry. Our companies meet the needs of more than 6.7 million customers, representing well over half the Canadian population, using over 450,000 kilometres of underground delivery infrastructure and storage facilities. Over the past decade, we've invested over $17 billion in this system to ensure that Canadians have the affordable, clean, safe, and reliable energy all of us have come to expect. My focus today is on what we call the natural gas opportunity, about how we build on that foundation to help our country to stimulate technology innovation, to deliver affordable energy to more of our fellow citizens, to build stronger northern and remote industry and communities, including Indigenous communities, and to support clean transportation fueling for the heavy-duty return-to-base, off-road, and marine transportation sectors. Three attributes of our industry explain how we can help. First, our product is affordable. High energy costs mean that families have less money for essential needs and that businesses have difficulty operating, much less expanding. Affordable energy has long been a competitive advantage for Canada, and natural gas can help us maintain and build on that advantage. Second, natural gas is an efficient and clean-burning energy choice. It has fewer emissions than many other fuels and is an important partner for renewables and emerging low-emission technologies. And third, natural gas delivery companies are innovators. Our utilities have a long history of supporting energy efficiency programs and driving innovation in energy end use. With these national priorities and attributes in mind, let me quickly summarize the 5 components of the natural gas opportunity and how the federal government can support it. First, connecting communities. Communities with no access to natural gas are dependent on more expensive, less reliable, and in many cases, higher-emitting energy options. According to ICF International, connecting rural communities would result in significant cost savings, emission reductions, and revenue for governments. Our recommendation to the federal government is to allocate $250 million in clean energy infrastructure funding to support the construction of new natural gas delivery infrastructure for homes and businesses not currently serviced by the pipeline system. Second, LNG for remote communities in the north. These communities not on the energy delivery system are looking for ways to replace their aging diesel power generation systems and reduce their costs. LNG offers a cleaner, more affordable and reliable energy option, and there are excellent precedents in place for its use in the Northwest Territories, Quebec, and elsewhere. According to ICF International, by 2025, at least 16 power generation and 47 industrial customers in Canada's north could convert to LNG, resulting again in cost savings, emission reductions, and government revenue. Third, using natural gas as an alternative transportation fuel. Market adoption of natural gas vehicles in Canada has been growing at only a modest pace because of the higher capital cost, the lack of widespread LNG and CNG supply and refueling infrastructure, and the uncertainty regarding taxation. In the last federal budget, funding was allocated to support the construction of alternative refueling stations, and our understanding is that project proposals around natural gas are currently being considered. This is an excellent first step. Our submission this year recommends allocating funding over 5 years to help cover a portion of the incremental cost of natural gas engines to encourage deployment. And as well, we recommend allocating further funding in clean energy infrastructure funds to support the development of new infrastructure. Fourth, renewable natural gas. This CO2-neutral energy source produced from organic waste is captured, cleaned, and delivered for use in the same way as any other natural gas supply. RNG is a locally available product that can assist communities and governments in meeting their GHG emission reduction and energy sustainability targets. It should be noted that RNG can be produced, cleaned, and injected into the natural gas distribution system at a cost often more affordable than other renewable options. Canada's natural gas utilities have set a voluntary target of 10% RNG in the system by 2030, equal to the energy needs of 3.1 million homes. Our recommendation is for targeted assistance to advance the development of RNG technology, focusing on biomass gasification, and an amendment to Canada's renewable fuels regulation to include RNG as a compliance option, as is allowed in the United States. And fifth and finally, driving efficiency and innovation. Natural gas utilities have a long history of supporting energy efficiency programs and technology innovation that have resulted in customer savings $1 billion in natural gas costs and reducing emissions by 50 megatons. Last week, my association announced the intention to create the Natural Gas Innovation Fund to build on that success. Examples of opportunities we want to pursue include high-efficiency combined heat and power systems, micro-combined heat and power systems for residential and commercial use, power-to-gas systems to store renewable electricity, new natural gas vehicle engine technologies, and renewable natural gas technologies. In a submission to the government's Clean Technology for Canada's Natural Resource Consultation, CGA recommended that the Government of Canada allocate funding to partner with utilities and others on natural gas innovation. In conclusion, our industry looks forward to working with all interested parties and stakeholders on the opportunities noted above that we think serve a number of national priorities. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to present to the committee here today, and I'll stop there and look forward to questions afterwards from committee members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Egan. Canadian manufacturers and exporters, Mr. Lavoie, Director of Policy, Innovation and Productivity.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour, Messieurs les...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee. It is with great pleasure that I have accepted your invitation today to present the recommendations of the Canadian manufacturers and exporters in terms of the pre-budget consultations. Our firm represents over 10,000 manufacturing exporting companies across Canada. We were created in 1871 as the first Canadian industrial association. In a few words, what is the manufacturing sector? It is a variety of sectors, ranging from the harvesting of natural resources and their development to the aeronautics sector, including automobiles and agri-food processing. We represent some 10% of the Canadian GDP. We also account for 2/3 of annual Canadian exports. This is a sector that employs 1.7 million people who earn $72,500 annually on average, compared to an average for other industries of $58,000. Our sector has spin-offs in many other sectors, including services, finance, logistics, and transportation.
Exporters, our association unveiled an ambitious plan to double manufacturing output and exports by 2030. The plan, called Industry 2030, is the result of about 100 roundtable consultations with manufacturers across Canada and the results of CME's biannual management issues survey. In our view, the next federal budget should implement a national industrial strategy based on Industry 2030 that will accelerate innovation, increase investments, and help manufacturers reduce their carbon footprint. Our key recommendations include, number one, creation of national clusters dedicated to the development and the adoption of digital manufacturing technologies. For example, additive manufacturing, 3D printing, automation, robotics, industrial internet. Number two, increase direct investments in fast-growing companies by the creation of a risk-sharing loan program that would help companies innovate, commercialize new products, both domestically and internationally. Number three, reform the scientific research and experimental development tax credit by conducting a complete legislative review of its legislation. Number 4, implement a patent box tax regime to increase commercialization of intellectual property in Canada. A patent box tax regime means that we would reduce the corporate income tax rate on revenues associated to products that were commercialized with Canadian patents. Number 5, we would like the federal government to expand the Atlantic Canada Investment Tax Credit nationwide. Number 6, adopt a strategic procurement policy for all the federally funded infrastructure projects, which would emphasize the need to maximize domestic economic benefits for the manufacturing sector, including in particular fabricated steel products that are used in about 80% of our infrastructure projects, while respecting our current international trade obligations. And lastly, we would recommend the federal government to expand the Green Investment Fund that was implemented that will be implemented in Ontario soon, that support manufacturing investments in green technologies. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Egan. I might mention as well, because witnesses find it distracting, all the briefs that have been presented are on our iPads, so if you see members looking at their iPads, they're likely trying to find out where you're at in your brief. National Pensioners Federation, Mr. John.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Herb John and I'm president of the National Pensioners Federation. With me is our counsel, Susan Ing. The National Pensioners Federation is a national, nonpartisan, non-sectarian organization of 350 chap fair and best interests of aging Canadians. Seniors and those who care about them welcomed the measures announced in the previous federal budget, but more needs to be done. An estimated 665,000 seniors live under the poverty line today, and this is not expected to change unless more is done to provide better income supports and to reduce their critical expenses like home care and drug costs. The Guaranteed Income Supplement for single seniors increased in July 2016. Single seniors, especially women, face far greater rates of poverty compared to their counterparts in couples. That will benefit 900,000 single seniors across Canada. While absolutely welcome, it is a maximum of just $2.60 per day. Much more needs to be done to prevent poverty among seniors. To prevent and reduce poverty among seniors, we recommend that the government, 1, increase the rates of OAS and GIS, starting with single seniors. Implement the Promise Seniors Index, but tie it to wages rather than prices to keep better pace with living standards, and immediately provide housing assistance. The promised $200 million over 2 years to support the construction, repair, and adaptation of affordable housing for seniors is, of course, welcome, but will not have an immediate effect on people now unable to pay rent and have enough for food and medicines. Medication and home care costs are a major source of financial strain for seniors and their families. There exist proposals to address those needs, but there is nothing immediately available to families right now. To address the immediate health care needs of seniors, we recommend that the government, 1, implement the promise to invest $3 billion in home and palliative care. There is an immediate need for sustained funding and national standards on home care. The patchwork of palliative care must be addressed immediately, and this new funding will be a major first step. 2, implement the promise to remove the requirement for a terminal diagnosis to qualify for EI compassionate leave benefit and increase flexibility in how the benefit may be used. The requirement for a terminal diagnosis has in the past stopped people from applying for the compassionate leave benefit. In addition, the flexibility in using the benefit better reflects on how chronic illnesses play out. And 3, development of a comprehensive national pharmacare system is necessary in order to ensure that every Canadian is able to access needed medications regardless of income and postal code. I will now turn it over to Susan Ing, who has further recommendations for the committee.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, while seniors today need the several measures to help them with their health and financial concerns today, they're also concerned about the financial security of tomorrow's seniors. Without reservation, National Pensioners commends the federal and provincial governments on reaching a historic agreement to increase the CPP. We welcome the proposals in Bill C-26, which is being debated now, to implement that increase and to amend the Income Tax Act to facilitate the deductions for the contributions. But we especially commend the addition of the increase to the working income tax benefit to allow lower income Canadians to participate in the pension plan. So we encourage speedy passage of Bill C-26. The CPP and previous availability of workplace pensions is largely responsible for the large drop in seniors' poverty over the last 2 decades. But the effect is done and workplace pensions are disappearing. So poverty is creeping up again, and as recently reported, seniors' poverty has increased from a low of 3.9% in 1995 to just over 11% today, or 1 in 9 seniors. Fully 28% of single female seniors and 24% of male seniors are living in poverty in this country. In human terms, that's 665 Canadian seniors living in poverty, mostly the oldest, mostly single, mostly women. So this issue of financial security is exacerbated about the concerns about increasing income inequality, and there has been quite a lot of discussion around a guaranteed minimum income. This committee itself has actually recommended that an expert panel be constructed so that the issue can be properly examined, and we encourage you to do so. Those are recommendations. We'd be pleased to take your questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Littler with the Retail Council of Canada. The floor is yours, Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Retail Council of Canada's 45,000 storefronts, I'd like to bring a retail perspective to your pre-budget deliberations. In the Tour de France, the last place cyclist is traditionally referred to as the Lanterne Rouge, and in recent years we've appeared at or very close to the end of these hearings, so we're delighted to be included today close to the finish. RCC made a written submission on August 4th providing somewhat greater detail on our proposals. In the time constraints imposed by a committee appearance, I'd like to restate our support for 2 measures in the last budget, notably the middle-class tax cut and the boost to the child tax benefit. These provide major benefits to families, of course, but they're also important to retail merchants, both through increasing disposable incomes for our consumers and providing higher take-home pay for the 2 million plus Canadians who make up the retail workforce. And by the way, that is the largest private sector workforce in the country. So keep it coming, we say, and if members are looking for ways in which to provide further assistance to Canadian families, there are over $4 billion in customs tariffs and $5 billion in excessive credit card interchange fees that could certainly stand to be addressed. We've spoken to those in our written submission. But the matter I would like to address today is that of the de minimis rate on imported parcels coming in by post and courier. Merchants are deeply concerned by efforts to eliminate the level playing field between retailers operating here in Canada, whether in stores or online, and those who sell from outside Canada and ship parcels cross-border. In a nutshell, the foreign online sellers' lobbying effort is asking our government to provide a tax incentive to shop literally anywhere else but Canada. Under a de minimis regime, no sales taxes are collected on imported products. That means that all other things being equal, the final price of an imported parcel will automatically be 13% lower than that same item sold in Ontario, or 15% if it were sold across the river in Quebec. That's not a matter of debate, that's simple arithmetic. In addition, foreign online sellers would be exempt from the customs duties that we pay on imported goods. The importance of this distinction cannot be overstated. A price differential of 13%, and in some cases upward of 20% once duties are factored in, will lead to an inevitable shift away from Canadian retail. That could be devastating to our operations, to our investment plans, and to employment in our industry. This tax advantage that the other side would gain is never, ever, ever mentioned by the proponents of increased de minimis, despite it being the obvious elephant in the room. And it isn't simply a matter of fiddling with the level, hiking it to $40 or $60 or $80 or what have you. The effects of the de minimis level bite very differently throughout our industry, depending on its subsector. A $40 level puts most of our bookstores and toy stores in jeopardy, for example. A $60 level affects those selling shoes and apparel. At $80, think about the impact on your local hardware store, and so on. What might seem like relatively minor adjustments, in fact, put tens of billions of dollars worth of goods in play. And of course, these are the very areas in which many local small and medium-sized retailers tend to specialize. We also take huge exception to our adversaries' attempt to portray this as a move benefiting information technology investment in Canada. If you think about it for a moment, their argument makes no sense. Our Canadian and our many transnational members are investing heavily in IT here to serve the market here. Even our opponents on the issue need to invest here because as the current rules operate, they can't simply service the Canadian market from outside. One of our Ottawa area members put it very well. They've just invested $200 million in a distribution and IT center in Prescott, 60 miles down the road. But if de minimis were to be increased significantly, they would have been better to go 1 mile further across the St. Lawrence River and into New York State and locate their plant and jobs there. Because if they did, they'd gain a 13% advantage for any sales into Ontario. Surely that cannot be the kind of policy that we want to introduce, a tax incentive not to shop here and not to invest here. By all means, let's work together to diminish stickiness, processing times, and brokerage fees at the border. But don't presume that bricks and mortar stores in our communities or investments in .ca websites are inevitable or that they're invulnerable. So for clarity, when people talk about raising the de minimis threshold, what they're really talking about is giving foreign sellers a tax-free sale advantage over Canadian merchants on all sales under that level. And they're talking about giving themselves a duty-free advantage as well, which Canadian merchants will have already paid. So yes, it would be about creating a new advantage, an advantage for foreign merchants, an unlevel playing field that clearly disadvantages Canadian retailers, be they bricks and mortar or online, and an advantage for the U.S. for jobs to move there from Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Littler. Then we have a joint presentation, I believe, by Sports Matters Group with Mr. Elliott and Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, Ms. Noble. Go ahead, Mr. Elliott.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the opportunity to present here today. I think you're going to hear a little bit of a change of pace from what you've already heard from the other presenters here on the panel. But I'm going to begin our presentation, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, as you suggested, Mr. Chairman, from the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. Our comments, like the others here, I'm sure, before the committee are a reflection of our full submission made in August. So the Sport Matters Group is a coalition of over 80 sport, physical activity, and recreation organizations, and the recommendations that follow are the result of a consensus developed by representatives of all of those organizations. Our recommendations highlight the priorities and actions that support Canadians, both able-bodied and those with a disability, wanting to be active as well as those pursuing high-performance endeavors, with an overall goal of improving health, wellness, and excellence through participation in sport and physical activity. The performances of our athletes at the recent Olympic and Paralympic Games, where Canada met its objectives and finished 10th and 14th respectively, will hopefully inspire a new generation of Canadian children to take up a sport and become active. As you might be aware, sport and physical activity participation levels have declined in recent years, and watching our athletes compete at the highest levels is part of the solution to seeing this trend reversed. Children need role models, and seeing our athletes strive for the podium not only provides inspiration, but also helps to instill a sense of national pride. In 2010, 90% of Canadians said the performance of our athletes at the Vancouver Games had a positive impact on Canadian pride. If Canada is to maintain or increase its nation ranking with the rest of the world, additional strategic investments will need to be made. Our recommendations are as follows. The most important support we can provide is an increase in direct financial assistance to athletes through the Athlete Assistance Program. AAP provides a monthly stipend and tuition support primarily to those athletes ranked highest in the world in their Olympic or Paralympic sport. This stipend has not increased since 2004, whereas the CPI has increased by a cumulative 23.25%. According to the 2014 Status of the Athlete Survey, athletes receiving AAP support reported an average annual income of $25,616. That was the average annual income of our high-performance athletes. That's 15% lower than it was in 2009, with an average of $15,200 of that $25,000 coming from the federal and provincial assistance that they receive. This is not adequate to sustain training for 30-plus hours per week to represent our country. We're recommending an increase of 24% in the monthly support provided to our carded athletes. This individual increase should be done without reducing the number of athletes funded and would therefore increase the Athlete Assistance Program budget from $28 million to $34.72 million, an increase of $6.72 million. In addition to providing direct support to our high-performance athletes, we are also suggesting funding increases to improve our coaching landscape and to better support the facilities in which these athletes train. Lastly, with 2 new team sports being added to the program for Tokyo 2020, we're seeking additional support for team sports. Our total investment request for high-performance sport is therefore $16.22 million per year. Our sector, though, also believes strongly in the need to invest in active, healthy living initiatives that encourage more Canadians to be more active. The individual benefits of being more physically active and less sedentary are well documented. Reductions in the incidence of chronic disease and premature mortality, along with an increase in productivity, will lead to long-term health care benefits for the country. The Canadian Institute of Actuaries has predicted that by 2037, fully 69% of our government budgets will be consumed by health care costs. Scary number. Clearly, preventative health care, including physical activity and sport, can play a role in mitigating this eventuality. While our submission spoke to the need to establish a national physical activity plan that would align with existing plans and frameworks, we have now been included in a process to do just that. We recommend that once completed, however, this plan needs to be implemented. And I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Kathy Jo Noble.
Thank you. If we're going to encourage Canadians to participate in sport and recreation, we need to ensure that there is the infrastructure that's necessary to allow them to be active. Existing sport and recreation infrastructure is in a deteriorated state at this point, where it is now becoming a barrier for Canadians to be active. As such, we're recommending that the government commit $12 billion over the next 10 years to a dedicated sport and recreation infrastructure fund. These funds would be divided between a repair fund and a new build fund. The key word in our recommendation is dedicated, so that infrastructure needs for sport and recreation aren't trumped by other infrastructure categories. This has been a common scenario for many municipalities. While $12 billion may seem like a significant ask, it represents 10% of the government's promised commitment to a $120 billion infrastructure fund. $12 billion is not significant when you consider that the estimated cost to repair existing sport and recreation facilities is $16 billion. And this does not include a single new build to address a growing, an aging, and a diversifying population. It's simply for repair. The 2015 FCM Infrastructure Report Card showed that of all the infrastructure categories examined, sport and recreation face the most immediate and critical need for repair. In fact, the report card showed that 47% of existing sport and recreation facilities are in fair, poor, or very poor condition. Sport and recreation facilities are community economic drivers. They are job providers, they are an entry point for new Canadians, and they are the heart of rural and remote communities. On behalf of Sport Matters, thank you for this opportunity to appear.
Thank you. Thank you both. Canadian Federation of Students, Ms. Emerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. My name is Jenna Amiro. I am a graduate student at Carleton University here in Ottawa. I am involved in my campus as Vice President External of the Carleton Graduate Students Association, and I am a proud member of the Canadian Federation of Students. The CFS is Canada's oldest and largest students' union, representing more than 650,000 students from coast to coast. Today I am happy to speak not just on behalf of those students, but also out of the hope for the next generation of students and workers. I'm grateful for the opportunity to address you today and excited to tell you about our vision for post-secondary education in Canada. Students are responding to skyrocketing tuition fees and mounting student debt with action. On November 2nd, in 30 cities across the country, we are hosting rallies and talking to our communities about universal access to education. Students, educators, administrators, and policymakers are all in agreement that a strong system of public post-secondary education is key to Canada's current and future success. It generates billions in annual economic activity, drives growth and innovation, and trains and retrains a skilled workforce that can compete globally, foster civic literacy, and promotes responsible citizenship. All students have a right to education, and Canadian society benefits from the skills people gain in getting there. We need universal access without upfront costs. By eliminating tuition fees and fully funding Indigenous students, you can build a strong foundation for growth and ensure access to education for everyone, no matter what province they were born in or no matter what their parents' income is. We need a new approach to post-secondary education. In 2017, a skilled trade college diploma or university degree is required for a decent income and a just society. Today, 70% of jobs now require some form of post-secondary education, and for the precarious employment predominant in the remaining 30% of jobs, people want pathways to a better future. Our system is failing young people. In 2011, 42% of Canadians between the ages of 20 and 29 lived in their parents' homes, up from 27% in 1981. In 2013 and 2014, over 200,000 graduates couldn't make a single payment on their Canada student loans, and this claim requires reporting pre-tax incomes of less than $20,000 a year. In May 2016, Canada's Parliamentary Budget Officer noted that post-secondary education is disproportionately accessed by higher-income Canadians, with 60% of students coming from the upper 40% of income earners. Those who are left behind include Indigenous and racialized people, people with disabilities, young people from low-income families, and too many recently unemployed or folks working with minimum wage jobs who simply want skills to improve their lives. The income barriers that prevent highly qualified students from accessing public education interact with related forms of discrimination. For Indigenous students, it means broken promises. The federal government works to fulfill our treaty obligation to education for First Nations and Inuit students through the Post-Secondary Student Support Program, or PSSP. In 1996, annual funding increases to the PSSP were capped at 2%. For the past 20 years, successive federal governments have continued this trend by choosing to maintain the 2% funding cap. As a result of this restrictive cap, funding has fallen far behind the growing demand for post-secondary education, rising tuition fees, and increasing living costs. The Assembly of First Nations has estimated that last year, more than 10,000 students were on a wait list because of the backlog in funding. In August 2015, Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party made an explicit election promise to not only lift the 2% funding cap on the PSSP, but to invest an additional $50 million per year for the next 4 years. However, in its first federal budget, this government failed to deliver on the PSSP funding promise to Indigenous students. The Federation is calling on this committee to follow through on its recent and historic commitment to Indigenous students. The Canadian Federation of Students supports the demand of the Assembly of First Nations to invest an additional $141 million per year into the PSSP to fully fund all students. This student support must be tied with reliable public spending. With federal spending on public services now lower than it was in the 1940s, it's time to reinvest in public education. The current lack of federal funding or provincial accountability has encouraged our colleges and universities to adopt exploitative labor practices and devastating tuition fees, treating international students as cash cows. Recently, provincial governments in Ontario and New Brunswick have taken note of the barriers of high tuition fees and have taken steps to fully offset those costs for students from low-income families. As the federal government, you can bring provinces together and enable access to post-secondary education through a dedicated federal transfer. By Statistic Canada's own numbers, our colleges and universities took in $10.2 billion in revenue from tuition fees last year. A return to a cost-sharing model of our passed can split this spending between the provinces, eliminating tuition fees, ending precarious work on campus, and ensuring a well-functioning, high-quality post-secondary education system. The federal government should ensure that standards are put in place to ensure further investment in post-secondary education is not misused. A statute similar to the Canada Health Act would serve this purpose. To finance this shift, we support the proposal in our 2016 alternative federal budget to increase the federal corporate tax rate to 21%. This would restore our tax system back to where it was in 2006 and raise $8 billion in revenue. Canadians for Tax Fairness have also identified over $15 billion in funds for federal spending with the closure of tax loopholes and creation of new mechanisms to generate revenue. We endorse all of these ideas with the additional proposal to cancel the federal tuition tax credit and federal tax expenditures for RESPs. Canadian businesses will benefit from a society where people are empowered to develop their capacities to the fullest extent possible. A skilled, curious, and vibrant public lies at the heart of any functioning economy. Maintaining the high tuition, high debt, diminished funding model for post-secondary education does not serve the interests of our society or the entrepreneurs who create within it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. We will go to 5-minute rounds, which tightens it up somewhat, but to get everybody on, we'll have to go to 5 minutes. Starting with Mr. Greywall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I would like to ask all of you a question, but that's not going to be possible because the chair is only giving me 5 minutes. So I will start off with the Retail Council of Canada. You spoke at length about de minimis. Recently, the United States raised their de minimis. And then you spoke about the argument of keeping our de minimis amount at $20, that every increase, like from 20 to 40, 40 to 60, would have negative effects on the Canadian economy and job losses and put bookstores and small businesses will close. What happened in the United States when they raised the de minimis?
So the first thing is that the United States is a really poor analog for Canada because they have no federal sales tax. So the principal issue does not apply in their case. They also do not collect state and local taxes at the border, and indeed did not used to collect them on interstate shipments. So the big issue for us, even bigger than the duty issue, is the tax advantage that would be created. That does not exist in the U.S. because they don't have an inbound federal sales tax. I think it's also worth noting that in what are loosely called Amazon taxes in the U.S., a lot of state authorities have actually started imposing taxes on interstate shipments because their local merchants and were being ground down, in effect, by certain merchants shipping interstate without collecting any taxes. So in many ways, they have gone in the opposite direction that eBay and Amazon and others are advocating here. So.
94 or 95% of all sales is done at the retail level. Is that correct?
Pardon me?
Is 94% of all transactions, like retail transactions, done in store in Canada?
It's of that order. It's a little deceptive because, of course, when you look at retail numbers, which are a little over $500 billion in Canada, about $100 billion of that is auto, about $50 billion of that is gas, and it's hard not to do that in store. Grocery, similar situation. So the numbers will be more inching into double digits in what you might call general merchandise.
But even in your humble opinion, even in your more most objective opinion, don't you think a $20 de minimis is just it should be revisited at a certain point?
I don't, and I'll tell you why. I mean, the advocates will tell you, oh, we're like, Ugandan levels. Well, actually, we're the same level as the EU, which is 22 euros, or the UK, which is 16 pounds. So just to be clear, there's in value-added tax jurisdictions, this is actually quite a standard level. Secondly, when the de minimis level was introduced in 1985, there was no HST, or there was no GST. So at the time, the de minimis level was really about collecting duty on paperclips. But in the intervening period, the HST came in. So in a sense, yes, the level has been frozen, but the disadvantage is actually greater now than it was in 1985.
Okay. I'm sure we can take our discussion offline, but thank you for your comments. Sports Matters Group, I could not agree with you guys more. Not on the amount, but the fact that we should be supporting sports and athletes. I think the social benefits are tremendous. I think Canadian athletes are at a disadvantage, especially to our neighbors in the south. I run a free drop-in clinic in my riding every Sunday, which I pay for out of my personal pocket, and about 150 kids show up, and I see the benefits of it on a weekly basis. So thank you for your testimony today. I don't actually have a question for you, but I'm a strong advocate, for increasing funding in that area, and whatever I can do to help you out, please let me know. The Canadian Federation of Students. I'm a recent graduate, not too long ago. I like to mention that time and again to keep me young. I couldn't agree with you more on the fact that, thank you, Ron. I couldn't agree with you more on some of your suggestions. So I used to be a big advocate while I was in school to eliminating tuition fees, and I still have student debt, so I'm still a big advocate on managing tuition fees. But then I did some research, and the research was this, that the argument goes that no Canadian child should be making the decision on whether they should go to school or whether they should go into the workforce based on the cost of tuition. And the resulting research actually indicates that that percentage is very, very low. So tuition, the size of tuition isn't dictating whether people are making the decision to go to university or not. So you just comment on that, because it kind of kills your argument.
Yeah, I'd like to read the research paper that you're citing because I speak to students every day. I work as a teaching assistant at the university, and I hear from students every day who come to me in tears talking about how they cannot afford education and how it's hindering them, or how they come from bigger families who they themselves have had the opportunity to get post-secondary education, but they are fearful for their siblings that they won't have the chance to do so as well. Our research certainly suggests otherwise.
Okay, so we'll agree to disagree.
Thank you, Raj. You're a little over. Mr. Deltel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It has been a long time since I've been graduated, but I'm very pleased to be here, malgré tout.
But everything.
Of common. I would like to make my first question to the spokesperson of Manufacturiers et Exportateurs du Canada, Mr. Martin Lavoie. Si je me fie à votre nom, je pense qu'on peut continuer en français.
I can go by your name. I think we can continue in French. Okay, we'll speak French. Thank you, Mr. Lavoie, for your testimony and the expertise. And in fact, I thank everyone for their expertise. You are, to my mind, the creator of wealth in Canada. That is what your association is, because it's foreign money that is being brought into our country, which is making the economy roll and creating wealth. In terms of products, I had the opportunity of being in Vancouver for a parliamentary committee on electoral reform, and just to give you an idea of my recent postcards. But I was looking at Vancouver Bay, where I counted at least 27 container ships that were in the direction of Asia. That is to say, that are leaving Canada, going out with products being sold into Asia and bringing back American dollars, pounds sterling into our country. So again, I thank you and your association. So I'd like to know, what do you think the impact of the production tax would be, the 11% tax, if we maintain it at 11%? But there has been some talk about 9%. Are you talking about the manufacturer's tax? Yes. Well, we spoke in favor of the reduction from 11 to 9%. Our association was a bit disappointed, though, with the result. In terms of taxation per se, we've always been in favor of production. We feel that increasing production is a way of lowering unemployment, and lower taxes means further investment in Canada. So more production, more commodities sent abroad, and more jobs in Canada. Well, in the House today, and since Friday, we have been debating Bill C-26, which is intended to increase the CPP. We have been talking about increasing the ratio from 9.9% to 11.9% and to have a contribution per employee per business of $1,000. So the employer would have to contribute $1,000 per employee. So we're looking at that same input from the employee as well. How do you think this will affect the businesses that create wealth? In Ontario, we had a recent event where there was a tax on the market force, on the labor force. Everybody is entitled, of course, to a minimum pension, but what we feel is that companies that already have a pension fund could have a deduction, some kind of deduction, where they could make an investment in their own pension fund without having a universal type of contribution. For small businesses of about 25 employees, the impact would be about $25,000. Now, what could an entrepreneur do with $25,000 extra dollars a year, would you say? Well, it's the sector of our economy that is the most intensive in terms of capital expenditures. We have to renew our machinery, our equipment, we have to buy, and so there is really a need to maintain everything at industrial grade level, and so that is extremely important for us. You must know, of course, that there's a new tax coming, the carbon tax, that will affect all entrepreneurs. This is a new Liberal tax, and it was supported by some provinces that there were, when the announcement was made unilaterally a week or so ago, but there were 3 that left that weren't happy and that left slamming the door behind them. What do you think about the effect of the carbon tax? Well, it depends on the effect. It depends on the area that you compete in, and say perhaps for some there will be little to no effect. It might be an asset or a blow, depending on the type of company that you are involved in. A carbon tax is involved in other countries, and the consequences of that tax, say here, would have to be reinvested to help businesses buy greener machinery, greener equipment, not just a tax that really would be totally isolated from the environment. Mr. Caron, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone here. I have 5 minutes to ask questions of all the witnesses. It's not easy. Mr. Lavoie, thank you very much for your answers. It would be easy to say, oh, we oppose the increase in contributions to the CPP, but you have set it out very clearly. At the end of the day, it will provide greater financial security for our retirees here in Canada, but there is another side. I have a specific question, though, on a patent box. In French, it is called quite differently. It's a regime to promote income, is the literal meaning of a patent box. In terms of the context of R&D, I think you'll understand my question. An argument that has been made surrounding it is this. Theoretically, it could be good for innovation, but it could also be a mechanism for tax avoidance. If you take a look at the situation in Ireland, there are very favorable rates with respect to intellectual property protection. Ireland is being used though, as a conduit to reduce taxes. Is there any possibility that there could be this type of question that would arise with the use of patent boxes here? Well, there are some manufacturers, some businesses that register their patents in that country to be able to do business with these intellectual property organizations. You might have X% of something that could be 100% of something else, but really the only way of getting around it is this. First, a patent box is not going to apply eternally. You can put a maximum threshold for so many years. Say, for example, after 3 years of marketing a given product, there would be a certain rate, and then it would fall back to another rate, and that depending on the amount of output of the business. Perhaps that would be the best way rather of dealing with the issue. Secondly, it depends how you deal with patents. In some countries, for example, instead of registering the patent, you might, and I'm here thinking of the Netherlands, what's done in the Netherlands. In Canada, in developing new products, we ask for R&D considerations and benefits, and I think that type of thing could apply to the patent box as well. I wanted to ask some questions on research and development, but I want to refer people who are listening to us to the answers that we got to questions that were asked in another meeting just recently. Mr. Littler, on the issue of de minimis that you spoke about, it's very rare that somebody comes here and asks the government not to do something. Normally in these pre-budget consultations, everybody has an ask. They want the government to do something. Is there real pressure coming from the United States, from the American lobby, to get this supplementary exemption in Canada? I agree with you. It's not so much at the retail level, but rather we want to be able to have this type of common area to do business.
Being brought to bear, and some of it was brought up in the TPP discussion round. I know that that a number of members traveling in the U.S. would certainly have heard some of that pressure, and it comes at a congressional level, but it also comes through trade emissaries. It is frankly a universal push, or maybe nearly universal push. There's a concurrent push in Europe to raise the rate from 22 euros to 80 euros. It's a very well coordinated and very well funded effort, and part of that is private sector, but there was certainly U.S. government involvement in pushing this because they would be the clear net beneficiaries of the change.
OK, merci beaucoup. On me dit que j'avais près 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I have about 1 minute left. I thought we had 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Strang and Ms. Eng and Mr. John. We're talking about, you mentioned rather the amounts that were promised for mental health care and for palliative care. That's a pledge that was made by the government. And since that time, we have heard nothing concrete. We've seen nothing concrete. In fact, there was just a meeting of the federal ministers of health, and they talked about transfers, but they didn't really talk about the pledges that the government made. So if the government should go in that direction, what will be the perception on the part of the provinces in terms of needs? Do the provinces agree that there are needs in terms of home care, palliative care, and mental health care?
Yes, Mr. Caron, there is an absolute need now, immediately, for both home care, for palliative care, and for mental health care. It has already been promised that some $3 billion would be spent in this category. None of it has been spent. None of it was proposed in the last budget. We surmise it was to be used as a bargaining chip for the current discussions with the health ministers of the provinces. Be that as it may, the money should flow as soon as possible. However, it is important that the money not be sent out without condition. Part of the problems with the sector at the moment has been that despite billions being sent out after the health accords in 2004, directly directed at post-acute home care and chronic care, Actually, the sector has not benefited very well, largely because the money was sopped up by administration, the hospitals, and indeed the doctors. So unless you solve those structural problems before, even $3 billion will not be enough. And so a complete package has to come forward, a proper strategy specifically to deal with home care, and it is targeted at seniors.
Thank you very much. Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions. Thank you all for coming. Mr. Lavoie, if I'm saying that correctly, you talked about investment in a Green Initiative Fund, but I'm wondering if for your industry you have tangible goals that you'd like to achieve. For example, how much are manufacturers emitting in CO2 currently, and how much do you think it takes to get to X level? Do you have those tangible things that this government could consider if you're asking us to invest in this area?
So a couple of things. The emissions in the manufacturing has decreased significantly in the last 20 years, but I would say half of it is as a result of huge investment made by manufacturers. As you know, manufacturing is highly dependent on energy, so there's a return on investment when you invest in new machinery and equipment that consumes less energy. The other half is, of course, because we've lost a lot of capacity during the financial downturn, right? So a lot of, pulp and paper mills, for example, have shut down. So obviously the emissions went down as a result of the shutdowns. The trick for our sector is that we want companies to export more. We want companies to produce more. By doing that, necessarily you'll do more emissions. So the way we look at it is how much emissions you do per unit produced. And what we want to lower is that intensity of emissions. Because at the end of the day, if we want to double export by 2030, we can't do that by shutting down plants and machinery and equipment. So what we would welcome, we would prefer a direct investment green machinery and equipment. But if there's a carbon tax, as I said, at least if the revenues associated with this tax is reinvested in plants, that would be our favorite option.
Thank you. But you don't have specific numbers in order to say you're going, because you understand the Paris agreements and the numbers that are required in terms of reductions and the timelines. I would assume that your industry has to reach those targets at a certain point, and you would require a plan, a systematic plan. By this year we're going to cut emissions by this much, and this is what it takes. So it would require more than economic conditions to slow down, because if you want to continue manufacturing and in fact expand that, then you would have to find a way to be effective at reducing emissions so that you can actually grow your economy in the new green world that we're moving towards. Yeah, and we'll see what happens with the carbon tax and what other provinces will do. Some of our members are being captured as we speak in the carbon trading system in Quebec, and I guess soon in Ontario. It's difficult to make a plan if you don't know what the regulation will be exactly. So that's a bit of the tricky question for us to respond now. But as soon as we know what the regulatory framework will be, both federally and provincially, definitely we will have a plan then. Thank you. Moving on to the National Pensioners Federation, you spoke about women face greater poverty risks, but I didn't hear any specifics in terms of how to address the poverty amongst women specifically, because if we did all, assuming we did all the things you've asked for, that would just invest and continue the gap, would just move along in that regard. Do you have specific policy recommendations to help shrink that gap? And then I understand your overall requests for additional funds for pensioners, but specifically, how do you shrink that gap?
The number of issues over the longer term, of course, increasing pension availability is going to help everybody, and women now are in the workforce and their CPP is a major source of income. The OAS was considered the women's pension for the longest time, because it is true that women worked in the home and did not have contributions to CPP. So those two things, increasing the OAS, the greater availability of work, and increasing workplace pensions will go a long way, and in fact, in the past, went a great deal of way to reducing poverty rates among all Canadian seniors. At this point, there are a number of issues. The cost of drugs, the cost of housing, access to work after a certain age. A lot of people are having to go back to work after their children are grown or after they've lost jobs. And in those cases, those jobs are denied to them, mostly because of workplace age discrimination. So there's a need to ensure that workplaces are discrimination-free, that even the availability of health coverage has to extend beyond certain given ages. All of those things will go a long way to removing all of the elements that contribute to poverty. Housing is one of the major issues now, especially for single people. As you can imagine, if you're in a couple, you can share the cost of one dwelling. Access to seniors' housing is limited. There has been promise of some several billions being available for seniors' housing over the next several years, but right now people are facing that stress, and so there's a need for housing assistance to help them with that. Women still are making less than men in the workplace. So workplace equity rules have to be enforced, and there has to be a significant improvement in working wages for women. The lack of workplace pensions in workplaces where women tend to work is a concern, but I don't see how that's going to change since the number of private pensions is decreasing dramatically, and there's no turnaround in place. So this is why it's so important that the CPP come into fruition as soon as possible.
Thank you both. Mr. Albas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses today for your testimony. It's very helpful. I obviously don't have time for everyone, so I'm going to go down and hopefully I can be succinct and for as presenters in return, so we get as many people as possible. I'm going to start with Ms. Sian Farini. Very excellent presentation today. Appreciate your views. I met with the Navy League today, and they actually emphasized some of the very same points, that when you invest in, when you set a long-term program, for example, the National Shipbuilding Strategy, that actually builds the certainty for businesses to actually invest in their companies so that because they know that there's work on a continuous basis. Would you agree with that? It sounds like your argument.
Yes, absolutely. It comes back to our comment about it's not just the initial acquisition phase, but we happen to like to keep our equipment for 20, 30, 40 years in this country, which means that every evolution of that equipment and the service of it over time, it means labor for the labor and a value to the Canadian economy.
It's those kinds of points where the current government obviously has a mandate to change things, but I really hope that they keep the programs that previous governments have put forward that really do work, and that those decisions aren't made ideologically. So I appreciate your presentation today. I'm going to move on to the sport matters and Canadian Parks and Recreation. First of all, do appreciate what you do. I hope the government does take a look at the 24% increase you've been asking. I've met many of the athletes, excellent representatives. It's part about investing in our brand and our excellence. But I'm going to go specifically on the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. I believe in 2014 we made changes to the gas tax, which allowed municipalities. By the way, we indexed that, we doubled it, we made it a legislative part of it, and then we also allowed municipalities to look after recreational infrastructure with that. That's an ongoing sustaining funding. And the problem that I have with your suggestion is that by designating a particular fund, you're going to have some province or some municipalities that jump onto it, and whether or not their finances are there or not, that's some will apply, some won't. And by using that method, you're going to see some areas receive the monies and some not. To me, the fairest way to do it is through gas tax. So do you still think that putting it in a particular fund is the best way to fund this?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And what I'm basing it on is CPRA represents the directors of recreation and parks across Canada and the municipalities. And one of the challenges to being, and why I say a dedicated fund, is being within the gas tax fund, and the government recently included us as a category in the Building Canada Fund, is for the gas tax, for example, we're competing, so to speak, against 16 other categories of infrastructure. And all I can speak is from the experience that my members speak to, and often when a municipality is needing to choose between roads or water or sewers or a new track or a new trail or a new pool, often the case they tell me is that we get trumped by those other categories. So that's why we're seeking the dedicated fund. And I know that the practice has been to allow municipalities and communities to set their own priorities, but we are looking for here is federal leadership on healthy Canadians and active Canadians. And to do that, we do need.
Yeah, and I realize there's
direction.
competing interests and whatnot, but to me, local decision makers get to say, this is our priority, we're going to put money to it. To me, that's the fairest because everyone gets it versus some people apply, some don't, and then it's all over the country. But I do take your points. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to go right now to Mrs. Emerald. Hopefully I pronounced your name correct. Miss Emerald, thank you very much for your submission. Actually, Stephen Gordon has done a wonderful job about illustrating how a lot of the money that goes to families that probably don't need it, and that focusing it more on people with low income so that they can get a quality education is important. But I actually wanted to talk to you about another area, which is making sure that students know ahead of time, before they go down a path of student loans and working towards a degree or towards a certificate of some sort, that we need to give them better labor market information. So they know that, okay, if I take a job at this, or pardon me, if I take a course at this particular area and I want to stay within the region, here's my job opportunities. Have you seen what BCIT does in British Columbia, where they actually have a site where students can find out what labor market demands are for particular programs and people with those skills?
I'm not personally familiar with that, but I do want to comment and say that it's good to inform students about the labor market, but what I think we really need to do is make sure that low-income students have access to education in the first place, which ensures that they can even enter into the labor market.
And I think that's agreed here, but I appreciate that part of it.
Sorry there, Dan.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Sabera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome everyone. A few questions, I guess, for a number of you, and I can try to make this short. For the manufacturers, Martin, the United States came out a couple of years ago with a national strategic plan for advanced manufacturing done under the President and then one of the economic councils. I'm a big advocate for that. I'm a big advocate for the Fraunhofer model, the German model with the U.S. mimic there. So I want you to comment on that within the patent box, because I know manufacturing is about 9-11% of our economy, depending on which month the data come out. So I would like you to comment on that. So there, Mr. Egan, on the Canadian Gas Association, that's an innovation story in my view. I think Canada has a huge role to play in both the North American and global markets on gas, whether it's LNG or domestic production. I do wish to, if you can comment on just the potential we have to displace diesel, specifically in northern communities with some gas, with gas, and the role it can play, gas can play, particularly natural gas can play, in terms of reducing our emissions, even though it does natural gas is not, it does produce CO2, but at a lesser degree on other fuels. Mr. Littler?
First, and then we'll come back to your next one there, Francisco. Go ahead. Mr. Egan and Mr. Lavoie, whoever wants to start.
Go ahead. So first, thank you for the questions. And Mr. Chairman, on diesel replacement, in our submission, we're clear on the opportunity that's represented. There are examples of diesel replacement already by gas utilities in various provinces. We cite 3 in our submission. I'd be happy to talk in more detail about those at some point. The fact is, a diesel replacement strategy is fundamentally about replacing a reliable fuel and a reliable technology with another reliable fuel and reliable technology. And we would argue that LNG offers both of those in a more affordable alternative to the existing option. And we are very interested in participating in the off-diesel strategy that the federal government is announcing, and several of our utilities are active in conversations about that. On reducing the overall reduction of emissions opportunity that natural gas presents, we released a report commissioned by us from ICF Kaiser a few weeks ago, which detailed specific emission reduction opportunities from our sector. We identified how we could reduce as much as 30% against a current baseline by 2030, highlighting specific areas where that could be done. We noted diesel replacement strategy in the north as one of those, connecting communities as another, natural gas for transportation as a third, renewable natural gas.
Switch it over to Martin now so we can, I can ask him.
Short answer, yes. As you know, the last budget had $800 million for national clusters. We just submitted a brief to the Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development for their innovation agenda consultations. And when we said that we would like these clusters to reflect the U.S. National Advanced Manufacturing Initiatives you were making reference to.
Okay. Mr. Littler, on the issues you've raised, interchange, tariff reduction, and de minimis, a few years ago we reduced increased the duty-free limits to, I think it was $750 an hour. When Canadians leave, we were told that the sky was going to fall out, and it didn't fall out. I'm a huge supporter of retail. I'm a huge supporter of retail in my riding, the mom and pop shops. After reading a couple of the non-partisan reports, non-political reports that have come out from C.D. Howe and a few others on de minimis, there does seem to be an argument for raising it from, say, $20 to an $80 level or $20 to $50 level. So I want you to comment on that. Before you do, the defense industry, so I want to lay them out, and I do want to ask, the opportunity for recapitalization, and I have to admit I'm not a defense expert or in procurement and so forth, but if you can just briefly comment on the opportunity for recapitalization and a made-in-Canada strategy without running amok to any WTO issues or anything like that. So Mr. Littler and then Christine.
Sure. So we have done some estimates on the value of shippable goods under $80. And obviously it's constrained to some degree by price at the top, by bulk and weight and so on. There are some things that fit under that threshold that would not fall into it, and by our estimate, that's $55 billion of goods that fall into that category. It is not a minor category. It includes the bulk of apparel, it includes the bulk of a significant amount of consumer electronics. These are pretty significant areas, and they're very hotly fought and contested areas at the retail level. The implications of being able to operate at a tax advantage that is, on average across the country, 12.3%, is potentially devastating in that sector. It is not the same thing as crossing the border periodically. We are looking at a situation where you have a tax incentive from the comfort of your living room for pushing a button, and a very significant number of Canadians will take that opportunity and will choose to buy the tax-free option. That is going to affect the members in your ridings, the stores in your ridings, the workers in your ridings. We don't know with certainty what the sensitivity to that will be, but understand that it's $55 billion worth of goods at risk. So any significant contraction in that is going to have a real impact at the ground level in your communities.
Thank you, Mr. Littler. We'll come back to you, Christine, following Mr. Leipert's questioning. I have a question to tie into what Francisco asked. Go ahead, Ron.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Mr. Egan, as an Alberta representative, I'm sure it's no surprise that I'm going to ask you a few questions about natural gas. And it seems like in this whole discussion about the environment and carbon, somehow natural gas gets missed out, because we have it seems like the option that is always discussed is it oil or is it highly expensive renewables? Gas is somewhere in the middle, and we don't seem to ever focus on that. Same thing with automobile manufacturing. It seems like we've gone from trying to move from oil to electricity. We all know in Ontario what green electricity has done to the cost of electricity. So my question is, I recall a few years ago in Alberta, and Canada launched a fairly aggressive refueling operation, but it seems like that hasn't gone anywhere, and I just like your sense as to why that hasn't, and is there something that could be done to speed up that? Because we all know that tailpipe carbon is probably more excessive than just about any other carbon source. So I'd just like you to comment on that.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So transportation infrastructure, building out new transportation infrastructure is expensive no matter what. And I think what happened with the opportunity for natural gas transportation infrastructure was the reality of that cost came to bear on the market advocates, and then oil prices started to drop and the comparative advantage wasn't as evident. So that was issue number one. Issue number two is when you're building out any new transportation infrastructure, I think you need to think about it in a broader context. So if we're going to build natural gas refueling infrastructure, we need to think about the 4 or 5 potential uses of it, and we should have a coordinated plan to address that. So not just for heavy-duty trucking, but its application for remote communities, its application for rail, its application for marine, and think about the strategic location of refueling centers in order to address that, in order to reduce the cost per unit, and thereby make the opportunity a more economically viable one. I think if we were to proceed on that basis going forward, we would see much more pickup of the opportunity for natural gas for transportation.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with you. Mr. Lavoie, not much has been made over the last couple of years in the downturn of the repercussions in the downturn on the oil and gas industry in Alberta and other provinces as well. But have you done any sort of research as to what the impact has been to the manufacturing sector in other parts of the country relative to the downturn and the scale back of purchases for primarily the oil industry?
It's huge. We did a study. I can't remember exactly the numbers, but there was millions of dollars just on Ontario manufacturers selling to the oil sands in Alberta. And I can tell, like, I visit plants pretty much every 2 weeks in southern Ontario and Windsor areas, and a lot of these companies just looking for other sectors now because they're running out of business. So it's a huge impact on even small and medium-sized enterprises, a lot of them.
And is there anything else picking up the slack?
Not too much, as we're back to pre-recession level in terms of production. A lot of companies, either if it's in the aerospace or others, are just making it the way they were, back in 2006, 2007. So we need a strong recovery from the United States. We need strong recovery in Canada, but it's just not there now as we speak.
And is the dollar, is it helping, or has it really not been that much of a factor?
Well, we were hoping it would have a bigger effect, but it doesn't have the effect it used to have before.
Okay.
Thank you, Ron. And Ms. Cianfrangini, in addition to, they're laughing at how I pronounce your name.
It was close. It was very close.
That's right. They always do. In any event, in addition to the questions that Mr. Sabero asked, you did say in your brief that a defense industrial policy doesn't necessarily require additional funding or even new programming. It does require the government to set goals and priorities for defense sector growth in areas of key industrial capabilities. Could you expand on that a little more? I think it ties in with what Francisco asked as well. Mm-hmm. And where do you suggest the federal government should be going there?
So the simplest way of, I guess, characterizing the industrial policy is that we're challenged as a nation to send signals to other nations, in particular in terms of our allies, about what we care about in this country and what we want to develop, and to use a term that gets everyone, I think, highly sometimes agitated, what we want to protect as strategic assets, technological assets for the country. Our failure to actually signal that means that effectively other countries do that for us. They decide what they'd like to keep and what they'd like to sell us, and we are the fair traders for the rest of the world in terms of defense, which is largely not subject to international trade agreements. A crazy example, which can put it into context for many people in this room, we just bought, over the last few years, a whole bunch of different American airplanes, C-130s, CH-47s, C-17 Globemasters, actually a lot of things that the Canadian Armed Forces needed. But if we'd actually had a strategy going into it, And we had said to the Americans, in exchange for purchasing billions of dollars worth of your platforms, we want to make sure that you buy certain technologies from Canada. This might have been to our great economic benefit. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about when we say we need to be signaling to the rest of the world where our strategic priorities are in terms of the nation. Another example, I'm sure, is the Prime Minister was visited by France this last week, and I can, if I was a betting woman, I'd put money on the fact that the French were talking about the Canadian surface combatant and their desire to provide a warship design for that Canadian surface combatant, which, by the way, represents about $64 billion worth of spend over the next 15 to 20 years. That is major capital. That is major capital and major investment that can be transformed into valuable jobs for Canadians if we incentivize those foreign primes to look deeper into the Canadian value chain and pick up companies and bring them into that platform design. So those are a few examples of what an industrial strategy would do. In terms of the actual opportunity, well, like I said, it is an opportunity of a generation. We haven't had a recapitalization spend in this country in the last 40 years this size. It's approximately $200 billion. It's bigger than your infrastructure spend, so it's substantial. And on 2 programs alone, the Future Fighter aircraft and the Canadian Surface Combatant, which is our RFP is about to be released, we're talking about over half of that expenditure on 2 programs alone, which could be tremendous opportunities to drive Canadians into global supply chains and to set apart specific Canadian technologies that we want to have in this country for that we have perhaps that exist already and for the long term. Lastly, in terms of the specific Canadian capabilities, we've been participating with ISED on a study called Key Industrial Capabilities in Canada, which I believe actually is circulating with parliamentarians and with upper levels of the public service right now. I would call to that study members' attention because I do believe it heavily isolates many capabilities we have currently and capabilities that we may want in this country.
Mr. McKinnon, time for one question.
One question?
One or two.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you. I think that major strides have been made here in this committee, this Finance Committee, over the years. We've had sectors like defense, we've had gas, representing gas pipelines, manufacturers, and so on. In addition, we also have the Canadian Federation of Students. So I think that our panel today is a very representative of our interests. Mr. Lavoie, to you, there are major decisions to be made in innovation in the coming weeks in preparation for the next budget. Have you got some idea of your tax for your businesses? Some of them, yes, and some of these measures, these tax measures, will represent a reinvestment of what was cut by the previous government. The research tax credit of about several $1 million, several other measures. The tax credit for machinery and equipment. I think that would represent some $200 million per year. And with respect to green investment, some $100 million a year. Ontario has a fund of $25 million. So for us, maybe $80 million nationally. Okay. You are looking to a revision of the legislation for experiments. The tax credit, the last time that this was dealt with was Tom Jenkins, who chaired a panel, and this was something that was very important, and we appreciated it. There were 3 or 4 persons involved in a larger investment project that involved parliamentarians. And at that time, there was the tax credit was shored up by legislation, but it seems to me that there should be a 5-year review for any type of legislation, though, that you develop. Thank you, Madame Deveau. Thank you for appearing before us today. Madame Gianfriani described herself as someone who was willing to bet. If I were a bettor, I would bet that the Minister of Finance is not about to give $1 billion for a transfer in the area of education. But just to make post-secondary education more accessible to Canadians, would there be another measure other than making it free that you could recommend to the committee?
Education. I think that that is our priority now. In the past, we have advocated for reduced fees. We have not been successful with that. Now we're advocating for free tuition. The time is dire. Students really are not able to. They're not able to not only attend post-secondary education, but they're also having trouble in the job market afterwards. So I think we don't want another solution. We want free education, and we want it now.
Thank you. We will have to cut it there. Sorry, Mr. McKinnon, and I would like to thank the witnesses. As always, we run at a time, especially when we have a lot of panelists. So thank you for your presentations, and also those who previously sent in briefs. We will suspend for 5 minutes or 10 minutes so the next panel can come forward. Suspend.
Take your seats, and that goes for committee members as well. And put away your telephones, and we'll get going. Okay. Welcome, everyone. As we outline at the beginning of these sessions, these are our pre-budget consultation. And we have, I believe, 8 presenters this afternoon for our final session. So we will try and be as brief as possible. We've asked you to be within a 5-minute period, and we may have to hold you to that or very close to it. And also, we like to let everyone know that all of the submissions are on our iPads, so if members of the committee are busy looking at their iPads, they're not checking the baseball scores. They're looking at submissions. So we will start with Ms. Freeland.
All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Erin Freeland Valentine. I'm from Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, and today is my 35th birthday. So no place I'd rather spend it than with all of you talking about how we spend well for the future of our country. So I'm a mom of 3. I'm a born and raised Northerner, and I'm the Dean of Land-Based Education at Deshinta. We're a land-based university rooted in Indigenous knowledge and values, and I'm going to take our 5 minutes to share with you how we think Canada can make impact investments that can result in closing the education gap while growing an Indigenous innovation and knowledge economy in the North. So Canada is the only circumpolar country that does not have a circumpolar university. And while we're all very aware at this point...
If I could just get you to slow down a little bit, our interpreters are having difficulty.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Excuse pour les personnes qui font la traduction là. So we're all aware of the impacts of residential school, but across the North, including in my home territory, most of our communities mean that our high school students have to leave to attend high school or post-secondary. This means traveling anywhere between 3,000 or 10,000 kilometers to go and stay in a residence at a different kind of residential school. When most of our kids leave, if they do, they drop out. Most don't finish, and many never come home. And every year we have more and more of our youth who are coming home in caskets. We know that we need systems change in Canada if we're to meet any of the TRC recommendations, let alone all of them. We need to close the education gap. But this does not mean funding more of what's not working. It means redesigning the education system to meet the needs of the students that it serves. And this is a national responsibility. 7 years ago, we started with a design build for a land-based education program that was rooted in Indigenous knowledge and values. We now have a full major and minor program accredited by McGill, UBC, and U of A, and we designed to remove the barriers to post-secondary. So the #1 barrier to post-secondary success, especially for Indigenous women, was the lack of affordable childcare. So we have a preschool through grade 12 outdoor school where kids learn with elders, and often parents get to hang out with their kids during the day and do activities together. Now, how does this relate to finance? We now have 7 years of data, over 300 program completions, and 0 dropouts. This has been an excellent return on investment for all of our public and private partners. The majority of our students who would be deemed high risk and not granted entrance into regular university, 100% of them are either working or continuing on in post-secondary. So 49% of our students have pursued further post-secondary, and 57% are employed, and 90% of those are in the NWT labor force. So our fundamental job as a country is to ensure that every single citizen has the opportunity to maximize their potential. This means that people need choice. And across the North right now, and especially in Indigenous communities, our youth do not have choice about what kind of job they want or what kind of career they want. Closing the education gap is critical because we're missing innovation and brain power that will make our country stronger. But it doesn't mean just putting more funding into the current system. We need creative financial mechanisms and social impact investing in social finance so we can collaborate with public and private partners to make an education system that reflects the strengths that our communities have, not just our weaknesses. So we asked the federal government for $5 million a year so we can scale Deshinta programs to meet current student needs. We currently get 3 to 4 times as many Indigenous youth applying to attend post-secondary as there's funding for. With $500 million a year, with $5 million a year, we could create 158 new jobs in the NWT. But 156 of these jobs would be for cultural teachers, language holders, and elders, people that generally fall outside of the labor market. So instead of trying to train people for jobs in a historically unstable resource extraction economy, we're leveraging the skills that we have in our community to support mental health, wellness, and cultural strengths for Indigenous youth. And when we see elders and older adults, many of whom haven't worked in a long time, working with youth, we see the survivors of residential school in meaningful employment where they're proud and training a new generation. Now, these outcomes are really hard to turn into metrics, but through long-term tracking, we know that our students and our faculty and our elder are healthier, visit doctors and hospitals less, are not returning to jail or unemployment, and not accessing social services, but are becoming community leaders. Now, we know that university degrees are directly tied to GDP growth, poverty alleviation, and rise in real income. Between May 2008 and 2014, twice as many new jobs were created for university graduates than college graduates. And by 2030, 80% of all jobs in the Northwest Territories will require a university degree, but 4% of our young people have one. When Indigenous women have degrees, unemployment drops to 1.9%. compared to 14% for those without a degree. They earn 50% more over their lifetime, and children are risen out of poverty. What we're looking for in this government is leadership for creative finance, not just to fund programs on short term, but to make impact investment in closing the gap in education, using evidence-based best practice in education innovation so that our country can be the lead when it comes to Indigenous education, and that we can build on the strengths we have in our community to educate our future. So we're urging you to take a good look at the business proposal that this federal government has in front of them and to ask questions of us so you can make great decisions about where we're spending our money for the future. Masacho.
Thank you very much, Ms. Freeland. Mr. Phelps.
Good evening. On behalf of the Board, Federation partners, and our President, Jan Christensen Wood, it is my privilege to have the opportunity tonight to share with this committee the priorities and hopes of the social work profession for Budget 2017 and beyond. The Canadian Association of Social Workers was deeply encouraged by the 2016 budget focus on Indigenous peoples, seniors, and children. Our submission today urges the Government of Canada to continue making accountable investments in building a stronger and more equitable Canada. Accountable health and social investments have been a central focus of advocacy for CSW in recent years, and we support the Government of Canada now seeking greater accountability for future investments in health. And we urge that this same accountability be expected when it comes to social investments. That is why CSW continues to advocate for the adoption of our proposed Social Care Act, national legislation which, if adopted by government, would set principal framework to guide the Canada social transfer and other needed investments. It is now undeniable that the investments in the social determinants of health have the greatest impact on the health of Canadians and, in turn, on the nation's health care costs. Demanding accountability to federal social investments is not unreasonable, but rather responsible government that charts a course for developing, implementing, and evaluating shared performance indicators and outcomes across Canada. This would, in turn, support the promise and delivery of a national poverty reduction strategy with the potential of realizing the reduction in the financial burden of primary health care sought by each province and territory. Budget 2016 enhanced the Guaranteed Income Supplement, which, combined with the Old Age Security, moves forward a basic income for seniors. CSW welcomed the enhancement of the GIS, as well as the redirecting of the Canadian Child Benefit to maximize support for low-income families and their children. We encourage the federal government to continue progressively moving forward with a targeted affordable basic income for both these highly vulnerable and marginalized populations. Basic income has the potential to become Canada's next great public policy legacy. In addition to supporting the social terms of health through a basic income, housing is also integral to creating a Canada that is not only compassionate, but cost-effective. Research has proven that when people do not have access to stable income or housing, they are much more likely to experience health challenges. Indeed, the experience of emergency room and frontline social workers is that people without access to secure housing often fall victim to the revolving door of acute care. With the knowledge that one acute care bed costs the healthcare system about $1,100 per day, the time is now to comprehensively address the basic supports required for all people to live in Canada with dignity and health. As a proud member of the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association, CSW agrees that Canada needs a national housing strategy with a robust implementation plan coordinated between provinces, territories, municipalities, as well as Indigenous governments to ensure effectiveness and accountability. Again, a Social Care Act could be a key piece in the development of accountability of such initiative. Another priority for social workers is addressing access to mental health services across Canada. As an active member of the Canadian Alliance for Mental Illness and Mental Health, we have helped develop and fully support the Coalition's recommendations found in Mental Health Now, calling for an increased mental health funding spending from 7 to 9% of total public health spending. Increasing the federal share to 25% would translate into an increased annual federal investment of $775.5 million. With such dollars, while such dollars could flow to the provinces and territories via the Canada Health Transfer, we strongly recommend that the funds be earmarked through a mental health transfer or a dedicated envelope to maximize accountability. Further, CSW supports the Mental Health Now recommendations that the federal government establish a 5-year, $100 million mental health innovation fund, a targeted and time-limited fund to spread innovation and lead sustainable change in addressing the mental health needs of all Canadians. Finally, CSW shares the expressed concerns of the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society of Canada, though over half the dollars earmarked in Budget 2016 for children on reserve will not be spent until the final year of this government's mandate or after next election. CSW urges that this government live up to its promise of ending the long history of discrimination against First Nations children and take immediate action to bring equity of services to all Canadians, both on and off reserve. Thank you, and I'll be happy to address any questions this committee may have.
Thank you very much, Fred. Turning to the Canadian Energy Pipelines Association, Mr. Bloomer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here with this committee and on behalf of the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association to present some short thoughts here. Just a reminder that the CEPA represents the 12 major transmission pipelines across Canada, 119,000 kilometers of pipeline infrastructure. Moves about 1.2 billion barrels of oil every year, about 5.4 trillion cubic feet of gas every year. And the industry over the next 5 years has the potential to invest about $50 billion in pipeline projects. That's $50 billion that would come from the private sector. Existing operations in 2015 alone added $11.5 billion in GDP, 34,000 full-time equivalent jobs, and $2.9 billion in labor income. To enable the development of this critical infrastructure going forward and the wealth that it can generate, and provide investors and lenders the confidence they need, we asked the Government of Canada in its 2017 budget to make a clear and bold statement about the importance of pipelines and the resource sector's contribution to Canadian employment, government revenues, and business investment. No single document is more carefully scrutinized by economists and the investment community than the budget, and a strong message from the government would be most welcome. Another essential component of mobilizing this investment is building public confidence in the regulatory process. This means that we must ensure that Canada has an effective and efficient process predicated on science, meaningful consultation, and deep regard for the environment, action, and climate change. No federal process will be more significant in achieving this than the Government of Canada's regulatory review, which aims to continue to bring confidence about responsible development of Canadian resources. CEPA supports and will be full participants in this process. We've heard the rhetoric about why we may not need pipelines and new pipeline capacity. However, transmission pipelines are the safest way to move our natural gas and oil resources to market and has a 99.99% safety record, and are critical to the Canadian economy and the future energy mix domestically and across the globe. Even as we enter into a period of energy transition, 3 key points that are missing from the current debate around pipelines that I'd like to stress are: firstly, the global energy demand is going to increase, and Canadian oil and gas products have the potential to play an important role in that energy portfolio and to help the impact on global energy poverty. Second, oil and gas production and exploration, especially to new exportation, especially to new markets, contribute significantly to the Canadian economy and to enable the capacity to fund social and infrastructure projects. And finally, sufficient pipeline capacity is critically needed to ensure Canadians get the full value for their natural resources. The need for pipelines and new pipeline infrastructure is critical if we seek to obtain full value for our natural resources. We agree with the government. Canadians need to have confidence in the regulatory process that governs how pipelines are built and operated. These are shared goals of government, industry, and Canadians at large. What we cannot afford, however, is to miss the market opportunity and the economic benefits the industry brings. To do so would be a detriment to all Canadians. Thank you once again for the opportunity to present, and as a supplement to our formal submission, and I look forward to our questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bloomer, and we do have the other submission on our iPads. Yep. With the Action Group on Urban Redevelopment, I believe that's the translation, Mr. Ceylan.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon. I am here on behalf of the Front d'Action Populaire en Déménagement Urbain, which is formed of 160 grassroots groups who work on housing rights and the fight against poverty. As you know, in Canada and Quebec, there is an alarming number of people and families who are experiencing serious and urgent problems of poverty. I won't give you too many statistics, but just a few to illustrate my examples. There are some 774,000 rental households that pay more than 50% of their income to house themselves, whereas generally the standard is about 30%, and we're talking mostly about families. There are some 382,000 Canadian households, and they devote more than 50% of their income as well. There was a report showing that there are some 235,000 people who have homelessness issues during their lives. And there are also problems, obviously, in Indigenous communities, Inuit communities, northern communities. And they have a problem of overpopulation, crowding, and the dilapidation of their homes. People with disabilities as well have specific problems. All of these people and these families, to different degrees, are barely surviving. They are marginalized, which means that their rights are undermined, and they cannot contribute fully to Canadian society and the economy. Now, in our opinion, the Canadian government has the ability and the duty to take action with this next budget to improve housing conditions and the standard of living for these households. So it must, without further delay, announce its housing strategy by ensuring, as the UN Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights said, that this be based on human rights and major investments are required. This would contribute to the revitalization of communities in which people and families are poorly housed or homeless, and this would have major economic spin-offs as well. The Quebec Housing Corporation, using its social program called Accès Logis, has calculated that for every dollar of grants accorded by the government, $2.30 are created in terms of economic spin-offs. We have more concrete proposals, that is, additional investments over the long term of at least $2 billion per year in housing, targeting specifically new social housing units. We must remember that the current budget of CMHC has not been indexed since 1993 here in Canada. So we're talking about $2 billion, but we need $2 billion more to be devoted exclusively to social housing. And the investments that have been pledged by the government should not be scattered across different initiatives that don't really meet urgent needs. We need to focus on social housing that is affordable and sustainable, and that takes the form of public housing, cooperative housing, or nonprofit housing. That's the first thing. Secondly, we need an immediate confirmation that the grants accorded to the current social housing stock will be continued when current long-term financing agreements expire. The financial accessibility of those housing units depend on it. And the people who need them most may not be able to use them if those grants run out and things happen very happy. In 2015 alone, there were 22,600 social housing units that did not receive their grants. Now, the budget of 2016 announced $30 million for nonprofit housing and cooperatives to maintain financial aid. That's a first step, but it is only temporary, and it only impacts a minority of the social housing units that are under provincial jurisdiction. So they are not affected by that announcement. Third, we need massive and recurring investment in the construction and renovation of housing units in First Nations communities, Inuit communities, including Nunavik, which has not received such grants for years, and in northern communities by involving the people concerned in the design and development of these social housing units. And as recommended recently by the Caucus of Big City Mayors, Global investments in the homelessness partnering strategy should be doubled until 2025 to bring them up to $350 million per year by respecting the different approaches that are required with regard to fighting homelessness. Thank you, and I'd be pleased to take your question.
Thank you very much. And with the Rick Hansen Institute, Mr. Brahman, and Rick Hansen Foundation, or Rick Hansen Institute, Mr. Barabel, and Rick Hansen Foundation, Mr. Brahman. Together, I believe. Go ahead.
Yes, I think we're consecutive. I'm Bill Barabel, and I'm the CEO of the Rick Hansen Institute. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. The Rick Hansen Institute operates independently from the Rick Hansen Foundation, and Brad will be speaking to their plans subsequent to mine. Both organizations were founded by Rick Hansen, but they have distinctly different mandates. We are very supportive of the Foundation's complementary mission. The Rick Hansen Institute is a transformational network for scientific research and implementation of improved healthcare treatments unique in the world. Our focus is spinal cord injury, but our innovative model can be applied to a wide range of other health conditions. 86,000 Canadians live with spinal cord injuries. The annual economic burden exceeds $2.7 billion in healthcare costs and lost productivity. This will only increase with the aging of the population. Permanent paralysis is the most visible outcome of spinal cord injury, but individuals with SCI, spinal cord injury, also experience a wide range of potentially life-threatening health complications for the remainder of their lives. Every year, 1 in 4 Canadians with SCI is hospitalized for an average of 23 days due to health complications which are often preventable. The average cost of a single readmission in hospital exceeds $20,000. For example, one of these complications is pressure ulcers or non-healing wounds, which are the #1 most costly preventable medical error in the healthcare system. Ongoing health complications make it extremely difficult for individuals to maintain employment. It is now well recognized in all fields of medical research that only 14%, that's 14% of health-related scientific discoveries are ever implemented into healthcare practice. And even this very modest accomplishment for those 14% takes an average of 17 years. This inability to efficiently and effectively implement healthcare innovation negatively impacts health outcomes and drastically limits the economic benefits from the life sciences sector. What makes the Rick Hansen Institute unique is that we have created a model to bridge this 17-year gap between healthcare innovation and implementation. We are accelerating the development and implementation of scientific discoveries, innovations, and best healthcare practices, resulting in measurably improved health outcomes, reduced health costs, more innovations brought to market, and economic growth in our life sciences sector. Due to the success of our model, we have been approached by startup companies in the life sciences sector across Canada, and I should add from outside Canada as well, to assist them with proof of concept and commercialization of Canadian technologies. Our institute has invested in research and clinical trials which have led to commercialization of successful healthcare products nationally. Our network includes 31 acute and rehab hospitals, rehabilitation that is, throughout Canada, as well as hospitals in China, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and Israel. In August, New Zealand adopted our research infrastructure as its national platform. In addition, we have been working to implement spinal cord injury acute and rehab standards with our partners at Peking University Third Hospital in Beijing. This is the preeminent trauma hospital in China. We have research collaborations in more than 25 countries worldwide. The Institute has had the generous support of the Government of Canada since its inception in 2009. We are currently requesting renewal funding of $48.5 million over 5 years to focus on the goals that are critical to our mission. These include continuing to expand our national and international network of researchers, healthcare professionals, individuals with spinal cord injury, innovators, investors, and policymakers. Supporting the development of promising therapies for repair of the spinal cord and prevention of treatment of secondary health complications, resulting in better outcomes, hundreds of millions of dollars in savings to the Canadian healthcare system. Working in partnership with Accreditation Canada to standardize care in hospitals across the country to ensure Canadians with spinal cord injuries receive the best care possible, no matter where in the country they live. And supporting the commercialization of innovation.
Just move back from the mic a little bit. And
Sorry.
we'll stop that. The mic will pick you up from a foot or so back.
Okay, thank you. And supporting the commercialization of innovations that directly benefit people with SCI and contribute to economic growth in Canada. The Rick Hansen Institute is committed to demonstrating value and return on this investment. The Institute applies significant leverage to the funds entrusted to us by the Government of Canada, securing diversified revenues to ensure long-term sustainability and impact. Thank you very much for your interest in the Rick Hansen Institute and your patience with my microphone problems. I would be happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brauman.
Thank you. My name is Brad Broman, and I work with the Rick Hansen Foundation. For 30 years, Rick Hansen, the Foundation, and many others have been dedicated to raising awareness, changing attitudes, and breaking down barriers for people living with disabilities. And we're grateful that the Government of Canada has been a generous supporter of our journey and mission. To date, by leveraging the donations from the Man in Motion World Tour, along with government and corporate support, over $325 million has been generated to support initiatives that promote awareness, improve accessibility, and facilitate spinal cord research through national and global partnerships. This work is now largely administered through the Rick Hansen Institute, which is independent from the Foundation with separate governance structures and missions. Having said that, we fully support their attendance here today. Their work is critical in supporting the quality of life for all Canadians with spinal cord injuries and continues to position Canada as a leader in the world. Back to the mission of Rick Hansen and the Foundation. A lot's been done, but so much more is needed to make Canada truly accessible and inclusive. According to StatsCan, approximately 1 in 7 Canadians aged 15 or older reported having a disability that limited them in their daily activities. And with aging baby boomers, that number is expected to rise to 1 in 5 within 20 years. As well, there are over 400,000 working-age Canadians with disabilities who are not working, but whose disability does not prevent them from doing so. How will we unleash the social and economic power of all people with disabilities, along with their extended families and communities? 1, increase awareness that disability and accessibility are big issues. 2, work to change attitudes about the potential of people with disabilities. 3, remove those barriers that prevent people with disabilities from fully participating in society, beginning with accessibility of the built environment, that is, the places and spaces where we live, work, and play. Finally, we need to measure progress and celebrate success along the way. This funding proposal will drive Rick's vision while clearly complementing the Government of Canada's stated objectives to build a more inclusive society, including supporting the efforts of Minister Qualtrough as she embarks on the development of accessibility legislation. But we know the Government of Canada can't do it alone. Minister Qualtrough talks about the need for complementary initiatives to raise awareness about the importance of removing barriers and seeing accessibility different, not simply checking boxes, but as an integral part of everything we do. And that's exactly the right orientation. Minister Sohi talks about applying a social inclusion lens to infrastructure investments, and that the time to act is now, and we couldn't agree more. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity with Phase 2 of the infrastructure plan to build an accessible Canada in which no one is left behind. For 3 decades, the Foundation has been a trusted and effective partner with the Government of Canada, delivering tangible results, and we're well positioned to continue being a catalyst for social innovation and change. Here are our recommendations and solutions. Overall, we recommend that the government fund the Rick Hansen Accessibility Innovation Strategy, a $37.6 million 5-year multi-initiative plan that will work in partnership with provinces, municipalities, the community of people with disabilities, and the business community to accelerate the shift to a fully accessible society. we ask that 10% of the overall infrastructure fund be set aside to help finance innovation, accessibility, and inclusivity in the design of the built environment. We ask for support to launch our accessibility program, anchored by a LEED-style certification program designed to rate the accessibility of the built environment and promote and recognize adoption of inclusive design principles. We ask that the government use the Rick Hansen certification program to determine eligibility of projects seeking funding under the infrastructure fund set aside that I just previously mentioned. And overall, our goal is that the Rick Hansen certification program will be self-financing within the 5-year window of this strategy, and it has the potential to become globally relevant, portable, and scalable as a made-in-Canada solution. Finally, we're looking for support to activate or expand several awareness-driven initiatives, starting with our Canada 150 signature event, which will coincide with the 30th anniversary of the Rick Hansen Man in Motion World Tour, and extending into the reinvigoration of National Access Week and expansion of programs within the Foundation. All these initiatives are intended to inspire,
I have to get you to wrap it up, Mr. Brahman.
Engaged communities and youth, and be a national call to action to build, measure, and celebrate an accessible Canada. This is the moment for Prime Minister Trudeau and the Government of Canada to join Rick Hansen and the Foundation aiming for a large goal that the world will notice, to make every building in Canada accessible by 2050. Thank you.
Thank you. With Veterans Canada, Mr. Brouillette.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Veterans Canada is Canada's largest dedicated veterans organization with over 8,000 members. It uses innovative software to shrink the vast geography of Canada so that veterans can come together in a virtual, real-time community. However, such innovation is lost on Veterans Affairs Canada. The department tenaciously clings to its version of stakeholders. Individuals or organizations whose members have little or no stake in VAC programs, or will not meaningfully or publicly question the policy path which has been so damaging to veterans and their families over the past decade under the new Veterans Charter. Advisory groups operating clandestinely while imposing fait accompli recommendations upon the veteran community does not meet any standard of openness and transparency. How do we get this right and fix the problems fueling the unabated cry for help from veterans and their families? Parliamentarians and Canadians endlessly profess that we owe our veterans a debt. It goes without saying that delaying Minister Hare's mandate letter promises is a moral forfeiture of this debt. Of the 23 or so specific promises, only 2 have been fully implemented and another partially. The promises are not enough. The mandate letter requires the minister to be open to other priorities as they arise, but first and foremost, to ensure a seamless transition of those releasing from the Canadian Forces. Seamless transition requires government and Canadians make a tangible, innovative rehabilitation and re-establishment investment in our veterans and their families. Canada can lead the world in veteran rehabilitation. Mostly unemployed, but not expendable, our most disabled veterans want a newfound sense of belonging to make a contribution to Canada and Canadians. Let us help them do that through assertive community treatment, supported employment, and gradual work re-entry programs. Neither should the most severely disabled and their families be relegated to the lowest income levels of a private, nor should they have their potential for income earning and productivity frozen for the rest of their lives. Canada must not accept this humiliating lifelong incarceration of veterans' potential. Meanwhile, the new Veterans Charter is a disincentive to work. It suppresses productivity and does little to encourage community belonging. If the most disabled veterans attempt to work, they will lose their earnings dollar for dollar through deductions to their income loss programs. Furthermore, Veterans Affairs will not support educational upgrading for the most disabled, even though such lifelong self-improvement has been shown to enhance health outcomes, longevity, and reduce access to costly provincial health care programs, as well as other treatment programs. These are not extraordinary requests. CPP disability allows recipients to earn up to $5,400 without deduction or declaration. The Disability and Rehabilitation Plan that covers parliamentarians and other public servants allows recipients to work part-time, pay into their pension, and not have any income offset up to 100% of previous full-time salary. Disabled veterans deserve to either continue paying into their retirement pension up until age 60 if necessary, whereupon they can collect a full pension, or have their income loss program continue for life. We do not have a universal post-secondary education plan for our veterans, even though just 17% of our regular force veteran population has a university degree, and 43% only have high school equivalency. Government professes the importance of families to serving and retired CF members. Yet after more than 20 years of public appeals, government can't even give family members their own identification card, let alone a picture identification card to veterans. We have to wait another 2 years for a pilot project to end in order for government to realize that all veteran family members, not just those of recently released, need access to DND's grossly underfunded military family resource centers. An unsupportable situation in spite of the unprecedented appointment of a Minister of Veterans Affairs as Assistant Deputy Minister of National Defence. We invest hundreds of thousands of dollars and even millions to indoctrinate and train a citizen to become a military member, but there has never been a single dollar put into a program to de-indoctrinate military members from the often harmful, counterproductive effects of military culture. The World War II Liberal government created what is widely considered the most successful and comprehensive rehabilitation and reestablishment program in the world. For the 1 million returning veterans, this was a true Veterans Charter. It was put together through truly comprehensive consultation and constructed by not only those that had a stake in the outcome, but involved the best expertise in rehabilitation, business, education, disability, and other fields. It is time for this government's promise of change to bring Veterans Affairs into the 21st century. Only then will we begin to repay the veterans in something more meaningful than rhetoric, so that veterans can prosper alongside the Canadians that they defend. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brouillet. And you have attached 15 recommendations, I think, to your submission, which the committee has.
That's correct.
Equitas, Disabled Soldiers Funding Society, Mr. Scott is president, and Mr. McKenna, Veterans Council representative. Welcome.
Well, thank you for letting us speak tonight. My name's Jim Scott, and I am the president of the Equitas Disabled Soldier Funding Society, referred to as Equitas, which is a nonpartisan organization supporting a lawsuit going through the BC Supreme Court by returning veterans of the Afghan War who claim that they have disproportionately low benefits under the new Veterans Charter compared to the Pension Act or their counterparts in the province through the Workers' Compensation Program. The main issue is a true disability pension for soldiers with claims under the new Veterans Charter. Over a lifetime, disabled soldiers are financially disadvantaged when you compare them to the previous Pension Act or their counterparts with provincial claims. To make this determination, we have looked at approximately 200 actual files provided to the law firm Miller Thompson, who works on this case pro bono. We see their actual benefits, not the benefits that are promised often to committees by Veterans Affairs Canada, and we see that many of these veterans are denied the benefits that are promised to politicians from Veterans Care Canada. Now, to go back in time into these halls here, disability pensions in Canada started in 1914 provincially. By 1919, they were extended to the military. Disability pensions ensure income. They are not taxable, they are not subject to clawback, and they equal the gap between what somebody would have made if they were healthy and what they're going to make with their disability. This has been a Canadian tradition for 100 years, up until 2006. In return, the Canadian worker and the military are not allowed to sue for greater benefits. So soldiers are not allowed to sue under the Crown Liability and Proceedings Act. That has been a tradition of Canada for 100 years. But that tradition has changed, or is being attempted to be changed. Now, the main difference between the provincial programs and the federal programs is the provincial programs are funded. The federal program isn't, and that's why I'm here asking for money, because there is no program to pay for the disabled soldiers when they return from Afghanistan, because we don't have a fund. It comes out of a budget. Therefore, there's tremendous pressure on Veterans Affairs Canada to trim, to deny, to reduce the amount of money in each budget, and they do a good job. Now, given this position that there is no pension and that we have to reduce the cost, the Canadians do not agree. In fact, great promises were made at the last election that they were going to restore pensions. The problem for the new government is the cost. It's the fact that a lot of these pensions are based on post-traumatic stress, which many people don't believe is real. There's a need to keep civil service working in Charlottetown, administering complex programs instead of a one-off pension that needs little administration. And there's a mistaken belief that if you give a young 20-year-old a bunch of money, you're helping them. This is proven not to be correct. Now, given that the new veterans' benefits are not the same as a true disability, the soldiers took the Government of Canada to court, and the power of the government, backed by specific legislations that they can't sue, the court saw a different version. They awarded for the soldiers, saying that things have changed so much that you have a case that can be argued. And what they said is, this action is about promises that the Canadian government made to men and women while injured in service to their country, and whether it is obligated to fulfill those promises. Immediately, the Canadian government appealed that decision, stating that the Canadian government has no duty of care to soldiers. That is about to have a ruling, but as a signal to where that ruling may go, recently the appellate court has allowed new evidence to be entered into their decision. That new evidence is the promises made during the last election of pensions for all disabled soldiers. And we expect this appellate court ruling within weeks. In closing, disabled soldiers and injured men and women serving their country should have pensions by tradition. It's a fundamental value. And I'm asking this committee to restore the funding that's required to restore that value to our armed forces. If we need cost savings, let's look at how we're administering our programs and the billions of dollars of administration costs, but not at the expense of actual pensions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. Turning to the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada, Mr. Ranjo. Okay. I don't think you had anything to... Did you have anything to add, Brian?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
How much time do I have, Chair?
Listen, we're way over time. Can you do it in 2 minutes?
I can. I'll cut down halfway because that's where the good stuff is.
That sounds good.
Okay, so I'll skip the salutation and I'll go right here. Don't try to repackage already failing policy as new policy. Don't try another series of expensive half measures. We've already seen the Department of Veterans Affairs try to sell their plan to us at the stakeholders meeting, but we aren't naive. We do talk to each other, and we have communication coast to coast. When you deny my friend in PEI, I hear about it in Vancouver. So we know what's going on with each other. And while some benefits are being delivered, the constant reality of a negative opinion on a reassessment essentially requires veterans to remain sick to receive care. It disincentivizes recovery. It is the opposite of what's claimed, which is a wellness model. As soldiers, we weren't perfect, but we always saw missions through to the end. No break till it's done. You taught us that. The Government of Canada taught us that we needed to do that for you to accomplish the security tasks of the nation. But now I move forward with that same tenacity to make sure my brothers in uniform are cared for, to make sure that they can count on the oath of allegiance that they swore to have meaning from the nation they swore it to. We're not going away. till this unjust compensation is fixed. I do believe you will fix it. I also believe the day will come when a financial assessment will be done, and the result will of course be the realization that by far the cheapest course of action would have been to fix this years ago, which of course you can't do. So please fix it now. The Finance Department should endeavour to produce the funding in 2017's budget to once and for all fix the discrepancy in care and compensation between the different benefit schemes for Canada's wounded sons and daughters. And I'll close with this point here. This is Canada. We do big things here. There's currently a robotic arm moving hand over hand in space that assembled the space station with a maple leaf on it. Insulin was developed here. And more recently, in 2 months, you found the funding, the planning capacity, and the ability to conduct a mass migration of 25,000 war-ravaged refugees to this country. I support you in that, by the way. And that effort had the support of the Canadian forces. You use Canadian service personnel to do that. You must be able to see the cruel irony then when we suggest that it takes 11 years of consultation to provide those same Canadian Forces members with the benefits originally promised them, when you've already done it before and you continue to do it now with our brothers injured pre-2006. For it to have taken this long, let alone continue, means the Department of Veterans Affairs has had to actively work at not finding the proper solution. So that needs to end. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. And lastly, with the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada, Mr. Ranjo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honourable members. The Heart and Stroke Foundation is a national volunteer-based charity led and supported by more than 125,000 volunteers across the country and close to 2 million donors. We have a presence in every community across the country from coast to coast to coast. The aim of the foundation is to create healthy lives free of heart disease and stroke. Despite an impressive 75% reduction in the death rate from heart disease and stroke over the last 60 years, every 7 minutes, someone in Canada still dies from heart disease and stroke. That's more than 66,000 deaths per year. Heart disease and stroke are the leading cause of hospitalizations in Canada. We clearly have much more work to do. The Foundation is seeking to partner with the federal government to do 3 things. Number 1, protect Canada's children and others by supporting healthy living initiatives funded through a manufacturer's levy on sugary drinks. Number 2, invest $10 million to empower Indigenous youth through CPR and AED defibrillator training, and $5 million to improve Indigenous people's capacity to access nutritious food and safe drinking water. And finally, 3, to invest in science by providing $30 million annually to support heart disease and stroke research in Canada. To help protect Canadian children, we are recommending that the federal government support healthy living initiatives funded through a manufacturer's levy on sugary drinks. Ideally, the levy should be an excise tax, increase according to the amount of sugar in the drinks, be robust, achieving a 20% minimum price increase, and include a broad range of sugary drinks. This includes fruit juices, which have just as much or more sugar than soda pop. This is important because from 2004 to 2015 in Canada, we've seen a tremendous increases in the sales of many sugary drinks. 627% increase in ready-made coffees, 383% increase in drinkable yogurts, 4% increase in sports drinks, and a whopping 738% increase in energy drinks during this time period. Last year, in 2015, the average Canadian consumed over half a litre of sugary drinks per day. That's almost 200 litres per Canadian in a year. A federal levy of 5 cents per 100 millilitres on just soda pop alone would raise almost $2 billion annually in revenue. This figure would be much higher if the levy was applied to other sugary drinks. A portion of this new revenue stream could be redirected towards subsidizing healthy living initiatives such as a national school lunch program, safe drinking water, and safe nutrition for Indigenous communities. There is strong and growing evidence that sugary drink taxation is working. In Mexico, for example, a 10% excise tax on sugary drinks was associated with as high as a 12% reduction in sugary drink purchases and as high as a 17% reduction amongst low-income people. This can work in Canada too to improve health and raise much-needed revenue. In Mexico, the imposition of the levy had no impact on Mexico's overall employment rate, no impact on the employment rate in the beverage manufacturing sector, and no impact on employment in commercial stores selling beverages. A levy is a win-win, raising revenue for much-needed programs for Canadians and improving health by reducing excess consumption of sugary drinks. Second, in Canada, we're facing a health crisis amongst Indigenous peoples. Heart disease rates are 2 times higher amongst Indigenous people compared to non-Indigenous population, mostly because of inequities. With the leadership of Indigenous organizations, the Heart and Stroke Foundation is proposing to empower Indigenous youth through a grade 8 AED CPR training program in Indigenous communities. This will provide grade 8 students with concrete skill and a broader knowledge of heart health, contributing to the development of individual capacity and empowerment. It will contribute to community capacity through the training of local CPR instructors using a train-the-trainer approach. This would also promote economic sustainability through instructor small business development and provide defibrillators in those communities that do not have them. Also, with the leadership of Indigenous organizations, Heart and Stroke proposes to improve Indigenous food security and access to safe drinking water. This would entail developing greenhouses and new technologies to grow fruits and vegetables in a sustainable manner. It would also support Indigenous capacity to help implement the federal government's safe drinking water commitments from Budget 2016. Lack of access to clean, potable, and affordable drinking water continues to be a challenge for many Indigenous communities. It also facilitates the consumption of sugary drinks. We know that sugary drinks are associated with a range of health issues, yet they are affordable, easily accessible, and seen by many as the best option to replace fruits and water, especially in remote and northern communities. Finally, Canada has been an international leader in heart disease and stroke research. We appreciate the $5 million per year budget, $5 million per over 5 years, Budget 26 investment in 2016 investment in women's heart health research. However, more recently, we have not been keeping up in heart disease and stroke research in Canada, and without further increased investments, we will continue to lag with negative consequences for the health of Canadians. There are 5 research areas requiring investment: heart failure, Indigenous health, stroke and dementia, creating capacity amongst early career researchers, and nutrition. Canada has not been keeping up with high-impact heart disease and stroke research. Applications to CIHR in all fields of research have increased 110% in the last decade, but in cardiovascular research only increased by 22%. In addition, the number of early career investigators in cardiovascular research decreased by 50% between 2002 and 2010. We need more investment to attract and retain young researchers. What's the opportunity here? In addition to saving lives and improving Canadians' quality of life, this investment would create high-value jobs. It would also help to attract and retain young researchers in the field. And finally, it would lead to as high as a 39% annual return on investment. This investment could be fully recouped in 2 years. Mr. Chair and honorable members, thank you for your time.
Thank you all. We will, due to circumstances of time and meetings next door as well, we'll have to go to 2 6-minute rounds with each of the parties and 1 6-minute round for the NDP if we could. Thank you all, and my apologies for there have been so many witnesses. We thought we had 8. We normally have 6. And everybody, circumstances led us to that, and I mean, everybody has valid points, so, and we do have your full presentations in our documentation. So turning first to Mr. Ouellette, 6 minutes. If you want to give a little of your time to a colleague, you're welcome to it. 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate all your presentations here today. This is for Jacinta Bush University, Dr. Freeland. It's incredible that you had 0 dropouts in that period of education that you were offering. Some universities I've worked at have had up to just a 13% retention rate in some of their programs with Indigenous youth. I was just wondering what some barriers Indigenous programs in education face with the federal government when trying to create opportunity and innovative programs which are based on an Indigenous worldview.
I think one of the biggest barriers we face is that we come from a solution that's interdisciplinary. So we have mental health work support, we have elders, we have professors all working together, as well as childcare. But trying to find funding for this, we're working with up to 7 different departments. So we're looking at over 14 different agreements in a year of funding at just one level of government. So really trying to work towards comprehensive solutions to funding for innovative ideas. And I think this takes a systems change approach where we can't just fund things from a departmental level, but that the government as a whole takes leadership over changing education systems for youth. So I think that that's one of the biggest barriers that we face is trying to find funding from all different pockets instead of the government saying, hey, this initiative is working, let's give it funding so that we can build an Indigenous institution that's really responsive and can create policy and is scalable across the country.
Thank you very much. My next question, I guess, is for the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada. When we see Indigenous communities and people dying literally from the unhealthy foods that they're forced to eat in this country, because often there's not a lot of choices, you propose a number of solutions there. I was just wondering how, you're proposing obviously a sugar tax. What impact would that have on traditional foods and also just increasing the level of beneficial impact on a community?
Well, a sugary drink levy could be used, as I mentioned, for a number of initiatives. It could create an Indigenous health fund, for example, which could promote traditional foods. And also, as I indicated in my presentation, it could help with greenhouse technologies and other innovative technologies to help with the growth of fruits and vegetables in northern and remote communities, which it's very difficult, obviously, to generally grow those products in those communities. And we do also know that from the programs such as the Food Mail program and Nutrition North to provide these kinds of improved food in these communities, that it's very, very difficult and very complex. So I think a levy could be used to support nutrition in these communities to great effect.
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate that. This is for Brian McKenna and Jim Scott. Very short, but as a still serving member of the Naval Reserves, Petty Officer First Class at HMCS Chippewa, this is actually really close to my heart, and we've had this discussion on this committee about the guaranteed annual income, and it seems that if we just gave the income to the a pension every year to these veterans, that they would manage their own affairs and be able to do probably better than creating a whole plethora of programs and bureaucracy around trying to find out what it is they're doing. Just allow people to really create their own lives for themselves.
Yes.
So,
go ahead, Brian.
I'll take that one. I agree with you. One of the things that we've encountered, sir, is that giving hundreds of thousands of dollars to a 21-year-old with severe depression, perhaps missing a limb, think back to when you were 21, right? What did young people do with money? And I don't mean to say that they'll all be irresponsible with it, but let's be reasonable here. None of us would hand that sum of money to our kids, particularly hand it to soldiers that are going through an operational stress injury. What helps them is a steady, slower, small, predictable source of funding, and it also helps them in other ways. You cannot take the benefits of Veterans Affairs to a bank and secure a loan against them or a mortgage, because they're all revocable. As soon as you get a medical assessment, they can disappear. My brothers pre-2006 could take a government pension literally to the bank. And so there's more than just the dollar figures that we have to look at with the soldiers. We have to look at the characteristics of those benefits as well. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Kinnan.
Ma question, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. And my question is for Mr. Sayer. Welcome. Welcome to FRAPRU here at the committee. I think you would agree that we have taken a new tack in terms of homelessness, and that there are things underway at the present time. How does FRAPRU assess what we have just started doing the housing program, the infrastructure program, and the new trend towards consultation that Minister Duclos has undertaken. Well, there were announcements in the budget that we certainly were happy to hear, particularly with respect to subsidies. And I think that the system has indicated that $30 million is a first step. But it was only over 2 years. And for those people that are living in co-ops, housing co-ops, these sums of monies are reassuring because 2 years goes by very quickly. And for the middle housing parks that we have, yes. But I think we have to go further. We need more than that. We have to have a national strategy. We want that national strategy to be based on human rights, so that it should be set down explicitly, say in the Human Rights Act, that humans do indeed, everyone has a right to housing.
Splitting with Mr. Albas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to split my time with Mr. Albas. Mr. Bloomer, when this committee sent out the request for submissions, it outlined 3 areas. I'd like to read them to you. Number 1, what federal measures would help Canadians generally and such specific groups as the unemployed, Indigenous people, those with disability, and seniors maximize, in the manner of their choosing, their contributions to the country's economic growth? Number 2, what federal actions would assist Canada's businesses in all regions and sectors meet their expansion, innovation, and prosperity goals, and thereby contribute to economic growth in the country? And number 3, what federal measures would ensure that urban, rural, and remote communities throughout Canada enable residents to make their desired contribution to the country's economic growth? Mr. Bloomer, if the government were to get off the couch tomorrow and approve a pipeline such as Kinder Morgan, which is sitting there waiting to be approved, would that go to meeting all 3 of these requests without costing the Treasury a red nickel? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. That was for my colleagues across the way, Mr. Bloomer. If you'd like to elaborate on that, please do so.
Well, no, I think it's the submission reflects the potential capital investment from third parties. It reflects the GDP growth and so on. It is an engine of growth for Canada, and it will fund a lot of the things that have been talked about today in terms of the tax revenue, royalty revenue, and so on. It is an engine of growth, and we desperately need it. And where we are now is capital is not coming to the country to invest in these things. It is leaving, and we need to be very clear. And that's the recommendation: is that in this budget, we need to be very clear that we're in this business, and we need to move it forward.
Thank you. I hope somebody was listening.
I think he was looking at me when he said that. So just on that point, the IPCC has said that countries that are able to be basically generate the most wealth are able to have the best outcomes when it comes to dealing with climate change because they have more options and more room. So I certainly appreciate your point, sir, and I hope that the government is listening. Changing gears, though, I'd like just to first of all thank Mr. McKenna, Mr. Scott, and Mr. Barea. Mr. Scott, thank you for your service, and also reminds me to thank Mr. Ouellette for his service as well. We should be mindful that veterans play a meaningful role in a variety of different roles outside of their service, career service. But I'd like to just ask you, as a parliamentarian, and this is my second term, in the last Parliament, we basically put in a change that would allow for Veterans Affairs when there was the benefit of a doubt, where they were inclined to not give a benefit because there was a doubt whether or not that particular benefit was owed or to the amount, that they would have a more liberal interpretation. And I mean that, of course, just in terms of the amount, not the political philosophy. So from your experience, Mr. McKenna and Mr. Scott, from speaking to veterans, and Mr. Bray, you can jump in there, have there been any material change in the way that Veterans Affairs Canada conducts itself with people on that marginal line?
I'll take this one.
At the end of the last term of the last government, with Aaron O'Toole as Minister, great strides were made to close the gap between veterans and Veterans Affairs Canada. With the new government in place, there's been a huge step backwards. The civil service is back in control. Department of Justice has convinced the government to go back to court. And I think it's just an evolutionary process of new governments. They have to take command. They can't let the courts be the moral compass. And we see a backwards motion, but it took the previous government years and years to get to the same place. So I'm not blaming one or the other. It's just a process. New governments listen to the civil service until the civil service bites them, and then they start to direct civil service.
How much time do I have, Mr. Chair? Okay, thank you. One of the challenges we have as parliamentarians is that oftentimes we will have hearings such as this, and then we'll ask for solutions. And sometimes it's pass another law, sometimes it's revoking an old program, sometimes it's adding more budget, adding more money to the budget. And we want to be supportive of it. But I think one of the key points you've laid out today in both of your testimonies is that even though elected officials such as parliamentarians may want to see these things happen, ultimately their execution of those goals is paramount. Is there anything else you would make, Mr. McKenna? You've kind of raised your hand.
Yeah, in regards to your question, sir, one of the things that we're very distinctly aware of, take for example how many times I've had to listen to there's $5 billion of new spending in the budget, right? And it just keeps getting flogged back and forth. But when you study it, you realize, well, how many years is that over, right? I can do the math. And on top of that, when we don't adjust the goalposts, it doesn't matter what's behind it. If you can't get through that doorway, if you can't get through those goalposts, all you do is increase the size of the pot that's unattainable on the other side, which then gets returned to the National Treasury. So when you have $5.4 billion or $5.6 billion over 5 years, that doesn't mean that's going to be delivered to veterans. That means it goes into the pot that is still as unattainable as it was in the previous administration. And I've heard the culture change that keeps being talked of. And so I'll tell you what I said when I was asked this by the department. I told them one of two things is going to be true here. If you've changed the culture so much that things are being seen in a new light, then all my brothers that have been previously denied should get a new shot. If it's that different, then they should get another crack if they've been denied under the previous culture with this new, more liberal culture, for lack of a better term. And so that's what we're dealing with here. But the department, silence on that. I asked that in May, and then the senior ADM who said he would answer it at the last stakeholder meeting didn't attend. So that's what we're up against here. Does that answer?
No. Again, I think all parliamentarians want to see good things happen. It's just the question of how do we do that? And you've raised a number of points. Mr. Broyer has made a number of points.
And,
thank you.
Turning to Mr. Caron.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I'm going to begin with Mr. Saillant. Thank you very much for indicating what FRAPU's expectations are. I met with you, and I certainly have taken note of certain proposals, particularly with respect to housing units that were very interesting. Now, with respect to the National Housing Strategy, there was $200 million that was announced in the last budget of the $2.5 billion. But there is an element that was not highlighted. When we look at previous housing, we look at a period of 30, 35, 40 years. That was the period of investment. There was the possibility of affordable housing in that time frame, but the change of direction that will have an effect. Well, that change of direction has been there since 1994, when the federal government withdrew from long-term funding of social housing. In 2001, there was a turning point in terms of affordable housing. It was housing that was financially accessible, but over time, who was it accessible for? Was it accessible, say, for someone who has a pension, who is a retiree, who has a CPP or a GIS or a guaranteed income supplement? Who exactly was this accessible to? And this was an extremely vague notion. It's become clear that that was a housing where one percentage, a percentage was defined, say 25% in terms of the income. Now it's become even more vague and less structured. We need to be able to have a better understanding, a more structured understanding of what this package will represent. Jacques Mecra and I have had very long discussions with respect to social housing versus affordability.
And it's hard to know where to begin beside this, because what you're saying basically is, and that's probably the most powerful phrase that I heard during these pre-budget consultations, civil service has taken over. One of the key commitments that Liberals did during the campaign, and I'll read it to you, is they will ensure that no veteran has to fight the government. This is exactly what's happening right now. And that's a key commitment that's been broken. And it's not for lack of trying on behalf of the veterans who've been injured. I was reading back in May about an article about the decision to go back to court, basically. And it says that the lawyer representing the 6 Afghan war veterans who initiated the class action lawsuit were actually ready to drop the lawsuit if there was a clear timetable given by the government. And when the government and the minister refused to do this, then obviously it was back in court. So what you're saying, basically, it's not necessarily the minister who's at fault directly, but it's really the civil service who decided to go forth, and come hell or high water, we'll go to the end of this.
I'll respond and then turn it over to Sean. We noticed this with the previous government, that they were fed information from the civil service and they believed it right up until the point where they took action to research it themselves, and great strides were made. I don't fault the new government. I just believe it's a process that you go and seek advice from experts, and that experts will give you data. They'll tell you the legal position, but it has failed to work in the past. And I just think from lessons learned, we know that we must move on from this. And simply, if we were to give 2 commitments to the soldiers, one is a social covenant so that they know that they're wanted and respected. And we've already had it in the House. Every member stood for it when the NDP made that motion here on the end days of the last election, or the last House. And that there would be a proper pension. I think everything would just disappear. And I'll leave it over to Sean to maybe add some words to those.
Yeah, as Jim said, we have a situation where successive governments come in and they immediately run to the bureaucrats. And I use the word bureaucrats in not the most pleasant of means. The definition of a bureaucrat being that someone puts process over people. And unfortunately, what we have is in Veterans Affairs, for instance, by their own admission, their own research, that out of a department of 3,000 employees, less than or just over 100 had military service. On top of that, how many of those bureaucrats have any experience whatsoever in disability, rehabilitation? How many program managers or policy advisors have actually worked in those fields to understand what they're creating? They're creating programs for fiscal convenience and not for addressing the needs of veterans. And I think that's why we're seeing a continual battle over successive governments. And the only way we're going to do that is if we have a massive cultural change at Veterans Affairs, where we employ expertise, where we employ veterans, where we actually go to the veterans in need and ask them to design the programs in concert with government.
Thank you all. I will assure you of this. These sections, I've noted them on my pad in terms of the minutes this discussion took place. I will assure you that this discussion will be hand-delivered to the Minister of Veterans Affairs. You can be assured of that.
Thank you.
I do have to squeeze in a question here to Mr. Bloomer. You in an exchange with Mr. Leipert, talked about the Kinder Morgan. What about the Energy East? What would that do from your perspective in terms of that pipeline and economic growth, both in the production area and the refinery area in New Brunswick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, obviously, we need these pipelines. We need access to markets on the Pacific Basin and the Atlantic Basin. We can use Canadian crude to back out imports. We can create jobs and sustainable jobs for the long term. So it's critically important. We don't need just one pipeline. We need pipelines. We need those projects.
Okay, thank you. Turning to Ms. O'Connell, and if there's others, I know, Fred, some of this discussion on housing related to you. If you have a point you want to add, raise your hand and we'll let you in. Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have a question for the Rick Hansen Foundation. Very intrigued in your discussion about accessibility of spaces. I come from the municipal background previously, so I just have a couple of questions. I really like this idea, so it's more of just technical questions to wrap my own mind around it. But how much specifically would you require for the fund? For the certification is what I'm interested in. Obviously, it's just like LEAD, that program, where based on your description, that's what it sounds like. And then how would you work with provinces who, I'm from Ontario, the Planning Act is very specific. So how do you actually work with the provinces to ensure that that these standards or whatever the certification program is actually upheld? Because I've seen municipalities try to put in their own scoring, and at the end of the day, if someone building the project doesn't want to do it, there is no real teeth unless it's in the Planning Act, or you're relying on mainly public spaces through municipalities. Because if that's the case, at least in Ontario, there's already legislation for that. We're already required to do that. And it's the larger public yet private spaces that I found were always the ones with the biggest barriers: malls, doctors' offices, plazas, those types of things. So could you just maybe highlight a little bit of that program for me?
Yeah, so we understand there's obviously a building code and it varies across the country. The certification program is designed to guide developers, building owners, and landlords to move beyond the code, beyond the minimums, and provide guidance in a uniform manner across the country above the code. And in fact, we would look to use the existing world-class accessibility standard that has been prepared by the Canadian Standards Association as sort of the minimum standard, moving beyond that into a tiered system of recognition for greater and greater innovation against inclusive design principles. So moving into things that we sort of take for granted but don't exist in a lot of places. So I think that the idea is that you provide tiers above the code, but that we don't act as the enforcers of the code. That's a provincial responsibility, and they have people like in Ontario, as you say. So we work hand in hand with the government. We are working with the Government of Ontario and the Government of BC to pilot this. The intention is to work with the federal government to pilot it on a bigger scale across the country and establish these uniform standards.
Thank you. And just for clarification, would it be designed similar to the LEAD program where it's the applicant that pays for the certification process?
Exactly.
Okay, so that's how it would be funded itself in the future, but you would need kind of this pilot funding.
That's
I
exactly
get it.
right.
I would love if this actually happens, because being in municipal government, how frustrating and awful it was to try and push private developers to do anything for accessibility that wasn't the cost of the consumer, and those with disabilities are already at a disadvantage for home ownership.
Yeah.
So I truly hope this pilot goes forward, but notwithstanding any funding obligations, but I think the intent is great. So do I have a couple seconds? I had a question about, for the both veterans associations. I don't know who can answer this, but you talked about pensions, and I've heard you, and I've heard, this is probably one of the clearest presentations I've heard on veterans issues, so thank you for that, first of all. But you mentioned pensions in terms of comparison to the private sector and the clawback for disability payments. Something that bothers me too, when someone with a disability actually tries to get employment and then they're at a disadvantage. So someone mentioned about in comparisons to the public service. Is that the model you'd look to, or do you have an idea, or you just want something fixed and consulted with veterans themselves to create that?
Well, thank you. I'll take half of this answer, and Sean will take the other. In the provincial workers' compensation program in 2012 in, say, British Columbia, you insure a person's income up to $72,000 a year. That's $6,000 a month. If they're totally disabled, they will get $6,000, reduced by 75% to $4,000 so that it's non-taxable and non-callbackable. If they can go out and get a law degree and work after that, that $4,000 is their base. Nothing ever happens to it. Under the new Veterans Charter, they're given earning loss benefits. The new Veterans Charter says that they can sue back the claimant if they were become healthy again and didn't declare it. The government now is toying with a pension of $1,400 a month for disabled soldiers, almost 1/3 of what the provinces give. The question's why? So these are the issues that we deal with.
So the model that, when I look at developing a model and doing the research in both my academic work as well as my advocacy, is I look at, first of all, what's available out there. When we say that, military service is the highest form of public service, then it better be a higher form of compensation than the public service. And we have to also, separate the two types of pensions. There's the pensions, which shouldn't be called pensions, but are really gratuities, monthly gratuities paid for pain and suffering. That's the lifelong pension that the Liberal government has promised to return to. That recognizes that a disability is lifelong, the suffering is lifelong, so should the payment. The other ones we're talking about are about offsets to income replacement programs.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and you're out of time, Jen. Mr. Deltel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mesdames, Messieurs, soyez les bienvenus à votre Chambre des communes.
Welcome to your House of Commons, and I'd particularly like to greet Mr. Saillant, a gentleman from Quebec City. I've known him forever, or practically. We began our career together when I was a journalist in '89, and I remember when I visited you in the Saint-Roch neighborhood.
Mr. Bloomer, welcome to the House of Commons, and maybe you have recognized that I'm from Quebec, thanks to my accent. But I can tell you that me, as all my colleagues from Quebec on the Conservative side, are strong and proud, very proud supporter of pipeline and Energy East project. I can assure you. Yes, for sure, we consider, as you are considering, the fact that as this is the best way on the way of environmental, economy, and safety, the best way to transport oil. Nothing can beat what you're doing as a pipeline producer, the pipeline builder. And also, we also recognize that for us in Quebec, we have a good experience on that. 2,000 kilometers of pipeline in Quebec. We had build a very good pipeline network from Saint-Nicolas in the south shore of Quebec City to Montreal, 250 kilometers, 5 years ago only, and 0% of tragedy of malfunction. Everything is all right in Quebec. And more than that, people are afraid to see pipeline under the St. Lawrence River. Yes, we are all concerned with environmental issue, but I can assure this House that in Quebec there is 9 pipelines under the St. Lawrence River, and the one to be built by Energy East will be not 3 feet under the St. Lawrence River, 300 feet under the St. Lawrence River, and more than that. Just between the pipeline and the St. Lawrence River, you have 40 meters of hard rock. So yes, it's a safety way to transport oil. So As you can see, I'm a strong supporter of that, and we are all, on our side, supporter of this project, just to be sure that everybody understands well. So, you are not the one who produce petroleum, but you are the one who transport it. But many business are involved in this project. So how business will be affected by the new liberal carbon tax who will apply to every business who are involved in any production?
You mean the carbon tax?
Yep.
Overall. Well, it's going to have an impact. It is another tax. I think everybody's going to pay for that. We haven't quantified at this point what that's going to be because we're working also in Alberta with a CO2 tax and so on. But it's going to be a burden on everyone. And the fact of the matter is, if you collect a tax, $1 tax, and even if you're going to recycle it back to the provinces and so on, there's going to be a pretty significant percentage of that tax that gets caught up in administrating that. So you're not going to get $1 back for the $1 in. So there's a drag right there that is not effective.
And what about the new way of doing business, not doing business, but the new way of a PPC that will be imposed by the government? You know, it will cost for a pension plan $1,000 by employee, and for each employee $1,000 more. So it will cost $2,000 for every person who works in Canada with the new PPC plan. What do you think? How do you think it will affect your business?
You're talking about the additional pension plan.
Price, yeah.
Well, again, it's an additional burden on individuals, and it takes away from disposable income, and that's an impact.
Okay, and I just want to correct, Mr. Chair, you're right. It's a Keynesian pension plan. In French, c'est le plan de pension du Canada. So I'm sorry for the misjudgment. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Mr. Phelps, you didn't get asked any questions. Maybe it was because your brief was so perfect. I'm not sure. Do you want to add anything to close the panel off?
I would encourage in the sense of moving forward with the National Affordable Housing Plan that we look at accountability measures with provinces and territories to ensure that we're actually investing in the right locations so that the social determinants of health are being addressed and that the primary health care costs are being reduced.
Okay, with that, we will I'll thank all the witnesses for their presentations and the committee members for a fairly long afternoon with our second panel of the day. And to remind members that we have the Budget Implementations Act, Bill C-29, to be reviewed together. Okay, with that, thank you all. Meeting adjourned.
No, Mr. Chair.